An entitled waitress literally has it out for me, as she treats me like garbage the entire time she's serving us. Things get really crazy after she not only disrespects me and humiliates me, but also pours hot soup all over me, burning me in the process, resulting in me snapping at her in a way that I honestly never expected. Here's what happened. Okay, so this just happened, and I'm coming here to seek the advice of anyone who's willing to listen, just so I can see if I'm in the wrong here. So basically, I'm a 23-year-old male, and I was in Greece over the last week with my fiance and her mother who lives in Greece. We stayed at a resort and my fiance's mother joined us for the last 3 days of our stay. Basically, this resort has a restaurant which my wife and I are very fond of. They have a very diverse menu, so we decided to come dine here every night of our stay. The first night we ate there, we were seated by a very nice waitress before another waitress came over to take our table. Now this new waitress immediately starts talking only to my wife and not to me, asking my wife what I'll be eating and drinking and not me. And it's like, okay, fine, whatever. I just politely sit there and I give my wife a weird look. When she comes back with our salads, I try to ask her a question as I am very allergic to seafood and I wanted to know if the dish I had asked for had any. Well, the second I spoke up, she scoffs at me and in a very rude voice says, well, I don't know, why didn't you read the menu? And she said this before walking away and stepping on my foot with no apology, of course. My wife gives me a puzzled look and asks if she should confront the waitress or something like that, but I say it's fine and she probably just had a rough day or something like that. We were then served by a different waiter for the rest of the night, and we didn't see the rude waitress until the next night, where I received more of the same treatment. This time, she said a shirt like mine didn't belong in such a high-end restaurant. And just so we're clear, I had a Star Wars shirt on, and the restaurant is far from high-end. I give her a confused look, but she keeps going with her job, accidentally spilling a bit of wine on my pants, talking over me whenever I try to ask a question, and then complaining at the end of the meal that my tip of about 10% wasn't enough. This continued for the next few days, but I don't like drama, so I just didn't say anything. The night my fiance's mother arrived, the waitress was rude to me again, while making jokes about me to my fiance and her mother. Now, my fiance's mother was just as outraged as my fiance and I, and said that she would complain, but I tried telling her not to. On the last day, which was today, we were sitting enjoying our meal when the rude waitress came to our table and very visibly and purposefully knocked my soup over that I was eating onto me. Now keep in mind, she had just served it, and it was burning hot, so I obviously screamed in pain and stood up. The waitress then smirked and said something along the lines of, "Oops, stop being so dramatic, it's just soup." But when she did this, I turned to her and for the first time I yelled out. I said to her, "You've been nothing but rude to me since the day I arrived. You've insulted and belittled me, you've stepped on my feet, you poured wine and food and soup on me, and then complained about the tip not being high enough. I've had enough of you." Now I know I maybe should not have yelled, but I was so pissed off and it honestly burned. Her manager saw it and brought the rude waitress to his office for a chat, and that was the first time I've seen genuine fear and remorse on her face. Some other waiters and waitresses helped clean the soup off me, and the manager came out to personally apologize and say the meal was on him. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the rude waitress get on a golf cart with her regular clothes on and her waitress outfit in hand before the golf cart departed in the direction of the reception. When we got back to our room, I overheard my fiance and her mother talking. My fiance was defending me, while her mother said that I shouldn't have raised my voice no matter how rude the waitress was. So now I'm sitting here on my bed, still burned and incredibly pissed off, and I'm wondering if I'm wrong in this situation because I seriously don't know what to do. Oh my gosh, this is some crazy behavior. First of all, this waitress just clearly had it out for you, and that's really strange because you didn't do anything. You're literally just going there to eat dinner and like have a good time, and this waitress out of all the waiting staff literally just had some kind of vendetta against you, and you didn't even do anything wrong. Now, I will say the original poster let this go on way too long. You should have spoken up right then and there when she was being rude and dismissive. Like the second she's looking at your wife and not you when it comes to like ordering food, that's when I would have been like, wait a second, don't talk to me like that. Don't disrespect me, this is inappropriate. Or something like that, like you gotta speak up. And for me, this is like a really good example that you need to defend yourself sometimes. Like you're not gonna be a bad person by saying, no, I'm not gonna take this treatment any longer. If anything, it makes you a better person by standing up and saying no more. But regardless, you did let it go on way too long, which meant her behavior was only gonna get worse over time. So yeah, you should have spoken up much sooner, but what she did was completely out of line. Like to go from pouring wine on you and like stepping on your foot all the way to burning you with soup, like dude, that is unacceptable. So no, you're not the jerk here, you didn't do anything wrong, but I really hope that waitress gets fired because she absolutely deserves that. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. I recently got into a car accident, but my mom still doesn't believe me when I say that I can't go to work yet, as she is constantly asking when I'm going to pick up my next shift, despite the fact that I can't go back without a doctor's note. And right now, I'm kind of considering moving out because this is driving me nuts. Here's what's going on. Okay, honestly, the title speaks for itself. I was involved in a rear-end car accident on the 30th of June while being a passenger in the back seat of the car. I got a lawyer and I've gone to the chiropractor. And the chiropractor said I sprained my neck and my back. I have a very physically demanding job, and this job constantly requires me to lift, turn, and support in excess of 100 pounds. We were in the car about 15 to 20 minutes ago, and my mom actually asked me if there were any shifts that I could pick up, but I told her no, there weren't any, and that I wasn't even 100% sure I should be working, as I haven't gotten a definitive answer from my doctor if I can even go back to work. And when I mentioned to my lawyer about my mom wanting me to go back to work too early, she told me that I'm not allowed to go back to work until my doctor specifically said I could. Right now, the claim is in the process of being paid for. My attorney just submitted all the paperwork to the at-fault insurance company, and I'm now just waiting for my settlement. But I don't know what to do because she's refusing to work and has refused to work since I got injured, putting us in financial ruin. I'm almost tempted to move out depending on how much I get because I don't want to be in this situation where she takes my money and thinks that I have to pay her bills. And that's another thing. When I get this money, she'll expect me to pay all the past due bills that she hasn't been paying. I don't know how to deal with her because she is asking me every single day, questioning whether or not there are shifts I can pick up and go do. It is constant, all day, every day. I normally can't even have a conversation with her without her asking me if I'm going to work. But if I ask her if she's going to work, she'll just say things like, well, if you're not working, then I'm not working, or something stupid like that. What should I do? Okay, I think you hit the nail on the head about the whole moving thing, because if I was in your shoes, I absolutely would move. Like seriously, think about it for a second. The way you've described your mom honestly fits the bill of someone who would take all your money. She's constantly asking if you're working, she's demanding that you pay all the bills. Like, is she stupid or something? Like, you literally need approval to go back to work, especially in an accident like this. So yeah, if I was in your shoes, I would be getting out of there as soon as I can, because this is some garbage that you definitely do not have to deal with. Am I the jerk for telling my dad that I will not pay for my brother's college, as he literally says he can't pay for it and he's demanding that I do it instead? Here's what's going on. Okay, so I had an argument with my dad the other day, and he told me that my parents will pay for my college fully, but I would have to completely pay for my brother's entire university tuition if I want them to pay for my college. If not, I would have to take out a student loan. But I told him there's no way I can pay for someone else's college tuition right out of college. For a bit of background, we are pretty well off and we have a nice home in a gated community. My parents afford enough to go on nice trips. They pay for all my extracurriculars. I've never had to work for my family, and I can use their money to go out with my friends. I know I am extremely privileged, and I know based on my parents' line of work, they could easily help pay for my brother. My brother is a smart kid and definitely aiming for an out-of-state school. I do not think it is feasible for me to have to pay $80,000 a year with my starting salary to pay off his college tuition. I said I would definitely help out with my parents financially in other ways, but I simply could not do this. I also have been applying to scholarships so my parents don't have to pay for my college fully. However, my dad said that I'm being selfish and the financial burden on them is too high. So am I the jerk here? Because I honestly just don't know if I'm wrong or not. Okay, first of all, I don't think I would ever take any money from my parents if this is the way they're gonna act. Like, they really expect you to pay for your brother's college tuition if you take their money? Like, why on earth would anybody take that deal? Like, just pay for your own college. Take out loans if you really want to go to college and figure it out that way. Because there is no way I would ever want to pay for someone else's college experience. Like, what's going on right now? Or better yet, just split the money down the middle and then you and your brother can literally have something towards college instead of you having the entire burden placed on your shoulders. Like, that's dumb. And I gotta be honest, and I think other people in the comments get this, but it's incredibly unlikely to get a great paying job when you're fresh out of college. Especially in this economy, dude. Like, what is going on? So no, you're not the jerk for turning him down, and I think the way he's acting is completely irrational. An entitled jerk comes into my hospital demanding to have a man remove his cast because he doesn't think any of the women are qualified to do it. So I decide to step up and help out while also guaranteeing that this guy has an anxiety attack the entire time. Here's how I did it. When I was 22 and a new paramedic, I worked at a service based in a small hospital. I tried to spend some of my time between calls in the ER, orthopedic clinic, or day surgery helping out and getting practice with my skills. I developed a good working relationship with the nurses who were 100% female. I tried to do the things like linen changes so they could have a break. I was also a reliable coffee delivery service with no delivery fee. They helped me by letting me practice my skills and teaching me different things. Well, one day we had a patient who was in to have his cast removed, and apparently he was a new resident to our country. Now, I welcome immigrants. Both of my parents immigrated to my country, but this gentleman, however, did not wholly embrace our cultural views of women's equality. I believe he grew up in a place where women's rights are trampled by religion and by laws. I don't support misogynistic beliefs no matter how grounded grounded they are in a culture, most especially when I'm not in that culture at present. He made a big deal of not addressing nurses directly, only the doctor who was a man. He made demands for the doctor to remove his cast, which wasn't going to happen, and that apparently they get paid way too much for that. He went on and on about having someone qualified, which apparently wasn't a registered nurse, but I'm pretty sure the qualification he was looking for was that they had to be a man. So anyways, I ended up volunteering, and I also had cut off tons of casts, so it was really dead easy if you ask me. Because if you can master crayons, then you can definitely cut off a cast. I entered his room and I boldly claimed that I was here to remove his cast. His English was fluent enough, so I could tell he was pleased to be addressed by a man, and with that he let me begin. Now I was about a fourth of the way in when he made some comments about being finally given someone qualified to do the task. Annoyed by his less than progressive attitude towards the wonderful nurses I know and love, I said without even looking up, "Well, I don't know what you mean. I drive an ambulance. This is my first time doing this." He made some noises of protest and voiced his fears that I would hurt him, so I stopped him and I asked him, "Would you like me to go get a qualified woman to come and do it?" Now he apparently liked that idea less and let me continue, and the entire time I was dying trying not to smile. I mean, this guy had palpable anxiety the entire time. And for reference, the cast saw doesn't even cut your skin, it just tickles, meaning that this guy was freaking out literally over nothing. Oh man, imagine being so stupid that you're trying to be like,
I need someone qualified, and that will be a man.
It's like, dude, you're an idiot. Any one of those nurses could have easily gotten in there and been like, yeah, I could take this cast off with my eyes closed. But instead, this guy decided to be like, I only want a man to do it. So I love the fact that you pranked this guy because he absolutely deserved it. An entitled bank manager demands that I say nothing to any of their clients coming in and out of the bank. So I decide to maliciously comply by literally saying nothing, which somehow still pisses off this manager even more than I ever expected. Here's what happened. So I work in contract security as an armed guard at a major utility company. I pick up extra work on my days off from my main site, covering banks that the company I work for has as clients as well. Today, I covered a branch of a large bank that has a white and red logo like stagecoaches and traces their roots back to the mid-1800s. And I'm sure you can probably connect the dots if you really think about it. After I was allowed to enter the bank, the branch manager gave me a rundown and read me the riot act right off the bat. And I had a feeling at that time that this might be a long day. 30 minutes later, a bank customer came in looking lost and said that she had an appointment with a banker. I greeted her and I told her to take a seat and that they'll be with her shortly. Well, that prompted the manager to come out from the back and get on to me for telling the customer to take a seat. She told me that I wasn't allowed to give any direction to anyone coming in as it could cause problems. And it's like, okay, I guess that's reasonable enough. Well, an hour or so later, a man entered the branch with a problem and he was a bit irate because of his issue. The manager said she could try to help him and ran into his issues, which caused him to get even more irate, especially since she was not acting very helpful and kept putting the blame on him for something that appeared to be the bank's fault. She came out from behind the teller desk and was looking for a banker to help the gentleman, and while she was wandering around, I engaged him in conversation. He was wearing a Marine Corps hat, and I started chatting with him about what he did in the Marine Corps and other things along that line. Well, she finally figured something out, and instead of calling the gentleman over, she called my name and did the throat slashing motion. After she was finished with the gentleman and wasn't able to help him while still blaming him for the situation, she called me over and proceeded to lay into me, saying to me about how we had just spoken about talking to people. She literally said that I'm here for presence only, and I'm not here to de-escalate, one of the main primary purposes of a security guard, or to speak with any of the clients. She said that my conversation with a man could have caused problems for the bank, despite it not being about the bank at all. She also said I wasn't to talk to customers at all. I asked her if she wanted me to be seen and not heard, and she indicated that's what she wanted from me. She then once again said she would call my supervisor if I had a problem and didn't understand her. Well, at this point, the message was received loud and clear. I notified my supervisor of the incident and then decided I was going to comply with the orders to the letter of the law. And this is where my malicious compliance came in, because I decided to communicate for the rest of the day with signs, from the limited sign language I know from my wife and friends, and just using gestures to try and communicate. People would ask me questions and I would just gesture and point to the please wait here sign. People would talk about the weather and I just nod along. I directed people to stand in line with gestures and nods. This went on just until before noon, when the branch manager pulled me into his office with the bank manager. He proceeded to talk about their concerns and asked me what had happened with the irate gentleman. I filled him in and it was pretty obvious by his reaction that my version of events didn't match up with what the bank manager had told him. Nevertheless, he proceeded to tell me how I was supposed to do things and that we had to work together. According to the both of them, anything that I say, even not related to the bank or financial matters, can cause problems, and it's best to not say anything, especially to irate customers. Afterwards, as I was leaving his office, I informed him that I had already let my supervisor know of the situation and that any further issues would be best brought to his attention. I'm half expecting them to call my supervisor to have me removed early, and honestly, that will be perfect for me, as I never plan to cover this location in the future ever again. I'm eating my lunch now, but I plan on continuing my malicious compliance after my break ends. I'll be present and do my rounds as I'm supposed to do, but nothing says that I have to greet people or discuss anything with anyone. Well, fast forward and I actually have an end of day update. When speaking to my manager at the end of the day, he informed me that they requested that I not return to the branch because of how I responded to their request to not speak to the customers. But I told him that was fine. I was going to request to not go back to that branch anyways, and I asked if I was getting written up. He said that I was in the clear as it was obvious that I was following the client's instructions to the letter of the law. And I know this is probably not a very satisfying conclusion based on a lot of stories you might find in this subreddit, but this is a very good conclusion in the contract security world, especially when you're dealing with clients like this. Yeah, this is some weird behavior because seriously, this guy is literally taking care of your bank. Like, why would you not want him to be like personable and kind to the people coming in and out? Like, I don't know about you, but if I was a bank manager, I'd be like, yeah, if you see something, absolutely say something. Be nice and show people where to go. Like, that's totally fine. The fact that they're trying to be like, oh yeah, you can't de-escalate anything. Like, that's crazy to me because like you literally are trained for that. You're a security guard, dude. Like, what are they thinking? If there's anyone that should be able to like de-escalate a situation, it's this guy. So yeah, this entire situation is kind of backwards and really weird, and I'm sorry they treated you that way because you did not deserve that in the slightest. An entitled rich jerk thinks that the rules literally don't apply to him, as he practically demands that I shut down a synchronized swimming class so that him and his daughter can go swimming during a time that is not open for swimmers. And I'm honestly so glad that I quit this job because I am sick of dealing with entitled jerks like this. Here's what happened. Okay, for a bit of context, I used to work at a private club as a lifeguard and a swim instructor. So the facility I worked at has 3 pools. It has the main pool, which can adjust the floor levels on one side of the pool for open swim to make it shallow, and we can drop the level down to roughly 9 feet for activities such as water polo, synchronized swimming, and any other sort of deep water activity like our scuba club. The other pool is fairly shallow. It's roughly only 4 feet deep, and it's typically used for lap swimming, so it is significantly colder. And then there's the third pool. We call this one the sun deck because it was right on the balcony where the sun let in, and it was significantly warmer than the other 2 pools, typically used for family swimming and that sort of thing. At the time, I was guarding the first pool, and we had just lowered the floor for the synchronized swimming class that was about to take place. These pools have designated hours for designated activities. Open swim had ended at 2 o'clock and was going to be closed for an hour for the synchronized swimming class. Well, in comes a father holding what appears to be a 2-year-old girl, who then asked us why the pool had been lowered. Well, I told him there was a class, so the open swim was closed, meaning that he would have to use the sun deck, which was at the top floor, or if he wanted to use that pool, he just had to wait an hour and find something else to do in the meantime. And for reference, the sun deck was literally a short elevator ride. Well, when I said this, he looked at me like I had just kicked his puppy and immediately went into a tirade saying that he spends so much money every year here and all he wanted to do was let his daughter swim. So I reminded him that the sun deck was open for open swim and he could gladly take his child upstairs. But apparently that wasn't good enough because he then started screaming at me that it was my job to keep that pool open for open swim and that somehow I'm responsible for it. And it's like, no bro, my job is so people don't drown. He then proceeded to cuss me out and tell me that it was my fault that his daughter couldn't go swimming and now they had to go home and I apparently ruined her entire day. I then told him that the schedules were posted outside of the swimming doors and if he had a complaint about our scheduling, he could gladly bring it up with the lead guard. But I was not raising the floor for one kid when we had a scheduled program. Now it was way worse when I was the swim instructor teaching kids. They always yelled at me why their kid wasn't learning how to do backstrokes yet, and it's like, well, I don't know, your child's like 2 years old. This place was incredibly bougie. Like a family of 4 would pay roughly $25,000 a year just to use the facilities. And with all things considered, I honestly do not regret quitting for a single second. Oh, that completely explains everything. That last line right there explains why this guy was being so weird. He was just some rich guy who's clearly spoiled, who tried to be like, oh, I can't believe you ruined my day and my daughter's day. And it's always these kinds of people where if you tell them no, they freak out and they're like, I can't believe you've offended me this way. And it's like, dude, I didn't do anything wrong. Like literally, I just said you have to go at another time or go upstairs to the other pool. You know, the pool that's in the sun that will be enjoyable, where the water's warm and it feels nice. But no, you're right, sir. Let me close down this class that we have scheduled on the door, by the way, just so you and your dumb kid can splash around in the water for a few minutes. That sounds like a great plan, pal. Like seriously, what's wrong with this guy? Like, does he really expect that kind of like customer service? Because that's not customer service. That's literally delusional thinking. And guess what, buddy? Just because you spend $25,000 a year to to be there doesn't mean that you're somehow better than everybody else, because you're surrounded by the same type of people. Everybody else paid for this, and yet they still follow the rules. Like, seriously, what's going on right now? Like, this is so stupid. So yeah, if I was in your shoes, I would probably quit as well, because this kind of treatment is absolutely uncalled for.
My boss called me the T word. I made her cry when she got fired. I used to work in hospitality in a metro known for its obscenely huge tourist population. You know, the city built around the mouse. I was a manager for the recreational division of the hotel. So one day, my boss, who we'll call Mary for the purpose of the story, comes into the shared manager's office and starts rummaging around for something, and strikes up a small conversation about work-related minutiae with me. It's important to note she's actually 2 tiers above me, but was acting as head of department while searching to replace my previous boss who recently quit. Great guy, by the way, huge loss to the company. As we're talking, she abruptly stops and says, "By the way, you need to shave your beard. You look like a..." And she uses a T word that would imply the kind of person who uses acts of destruction to incite the conflicts like we've been having in the Middle East. And I don't employ people who look like they're about to hijack planes. Haha! Funny joke between colleagues, right? Nope. I'm half Indian, and I do look Middle Eastern, and I've been taking this kind of crap since middle school. Plus, Mary and I aren't close at all. So I reply as calmly as I can muster, "Hey, I get that you're trying to be funny, but on my end it comes off as pretty ignorant, so I'd appreciate it if you chilled out with that stuff." To which Mary retorts, "Oh, I'm ignorant? We'll see how ignorant I am during your annual review," and proceeds to walk out of the room in a huff. My jaw dropped so low I could taste the floor. You'd think it was an easy fix, right? Go to HR and all. She's made rude comments like this before, and I've refrained from contacting HR because I didn't want to be petty. But now she threatened my pay, and that's no bueno. So I go to HR like a good boy, and I tell the HR director, who we'll call Boyd. I explicitly ask him not to mention it to anyone, just to log it away in case someone else reports something similar, and he can establish a pattern of behavior. Well, Boyd decided that he simply must talk to Mary about it. I stress again that I'm not comfortable with it, since she strikes me as the vindictive type. No good. He promises me there'll be no retaliation and tells me he'll contact me later for a statement, which I thought was weird. Why not make a statement now? And that was that. About a week goes by and I follow up with Boyd because I've been getting some less than pleasant vibes from Mary. Nothing substantial, but odd. When I ask what happened, he tells me, "Well, it appears that Mary was just joking, but she's agreed to never say anything like that again. Your annual review is not in jeopardy." Okay. At that point, I decide to just let it go. Fast forward a month and our new director for our department is hired, and surprise, surprise, it's Mary's roommate and former front desk supervisor, Joe. Okay, cool. I'm used to the nepotism because the entire hotel basically operates that way, whatever. I've never had an issue with him. I didn't know him too well, but I'm happy our little hive has a leader again. Man, how freaking naive I was. From the get-go, he is unpleasant. Snide comments left and right, changing my schedule at the last minute every week or scheduling me on my established days off, giving away opportunities to my peers that I'm never considered for, making me take improvement classes none of my peers have to take. All strange, but up to that point nothing earth-shattering, until one day I get written up out of the blue, first ever write-up by the way, for refusing to inform a superior of leaving the premises. Referring to me leaving the day prior without literally saying the words, "Hey Joe, I'm leaving for the day." 1. This is not an established policy, written or otherwise. When I say I'm leaving, it's a courtesy. 2. I know for a fact my peers don't always say when they leave, personal observation, and was corroborated by them after asking around. 3. Knowing that my peers aren't held to the same bogus standard and having never been written up for it, I know this is a direct shot at me. My review is screwed. Best part? Joe let it slip that Mary asked for me after I left, and when it was found that I was indeed gone, she requested the write-up. That was a screw-up from her. The next screw-up came when Boyd decided to cover his own butt when I approached him with all the evidence pointing to retaliation and discrimination in the workplace. I learned he never properly documented his discussion with me or Mary, and that he's been basically playing the whole fricking thing by ear. I decided to write my long-past due statement then and there, turn it in, and email a picture copy to the corporate office. I tell Boyd that I'm sorely disappointed about how he handled the issue, and he responds by accusing me of dramatizing the whole ordeal. He was very flippant about the whole thing, rolling his eyes and everything. Okay, buddy, I see you now. So finally, we've reached the revenge. After some time, I scrounge up all the evidence I can. My write-up, my co-workers' write-up records, with their permission of course, company policy manuals, my schedules for the past month, including the bogus classes only I was made to attend, my co-workers' schedules, witness statements from the peers when Mary has said other demeaning things, and a few other items. Next step, I tell off Joe because screw him. I make sure he's very angry when I leave. You'll see why later. After crossing my T's and dotting my I's, I resigned with 2 weeks' notice. That night, I type up a letter to the EEOC, or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and I attach all of my evidence. I mention Mary, Boyd, and Joe by first and last name. I hint that I'm pondering a lawsuit. A few weeks later, I have my girlfriend call my old job, pretending to be a potential employer, asking for a reference. I give her the extension to Joe's desk. As I predicted, he slanders the ever-loving crap out of me. Straight up lies, even got my resignation date wrong along with my attendance record, all verifiable, which helps my case. I tried the same trick with Boyd, but he was smart enough to point my girlfriend in the direction of a third-party reference dialer, the company's supposed to use for these kinds of calls. I proceed to send my old employer, corporate included, a cease and desist letter with a transcript of the call, hinting I may sue for slander. The results of all this? Some time passes, and the other day I was at the bank with my girlfriend, and I got a call from an old co-worker. I missed the call, but I resigned to call him back later. Less than an hour later, I got 5 or 6 calls and texts informing me that Mary, Joe, and Boyd were all fired the same day and walked out of the building. Mary cried. Apparently, the corporate office was contacted by the EEOC and launched their own internal investigation, matching their records with my evidence. The EEOC sent me a return letter with the company's statement, which was fallacious as all frick due to their interviews with the Three Stooges, but nonetheless, I suppose they decided it was easier to nip it in the bud and sack their butts just to be safe. Karma may be a B-word, but in this case, she had nothing fricking to do with it. In short, a boss makes a racist joke and threatens my annual pay raise, 2 other stooges get themselves involved, and a few months later, I get all 3 of their butts fired the same day. Yeah, well, consequences well earned there, don't you think, folks? Look, in a certain circle with a very well-established relationship of banter, Mary's comment might have been alright if they said that kind of thing to each other all the time, and the author had shown that they were cool with it. But even then, it's pretty questionable from an outside perspective, and definitely a fireable offense if the author decided to keep records of it. He maybe gave Joe a bit of a shove over the edge by antagonizing him before resigning. But then again, if that's all it took for Joe to go about falsifying information maliciously, then screw Joe. And screw Boyd too. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Redneck thinks it's funny to yank out mailboxes. My dad makes him pay. This happened a long time ago, but it still makes me giggle to this day. So way back in the day, in the mid-90s or so, my family lived in a log cabin on 10 acres of land in a rural area, 10 minutes or so out of town. It wasn't totally the sticks, but you could definitely hear banjo music in the background sometimes. At the end of our nearly quarter-mile-long driveway was one of those roads that was also technically a state highway. In the AM, I'd trudge down to wait for the bus, and when I got home, I'd grab the mail and carry it back. Until one Monday morning when I went out and noticed the mailbox was gone. On closer inspection, it looked like it had just been ripped out of the ground. Dad was obviously not pleased. He went to talk with the county sheriff, who happened to live a mile down the road. Turns out it had been happening up and down the road for months. Someone was tossing a chain over mailboxes and yanking them out with their vehicle. He suspected a guy down the road with his big lifted 4-wheel drive truck, but couldn't prove anything. Usually happened on Saturday and Sunday nights, with people finding out in the morning. Also, seems the nicer the mailbox, the bigger the target, and many had been hit multiple times. People had tried digging them deeper, using more durable wood, among other things. and this guy just took it as a challenge and ripped them out again. Soft, sandy ground, and his truck was an absolute monster. Well, Dad said, challenge fricking accepted. A bit about my father. He's a steelworker with an engineering background and graduate degree. Built like a bear with forearms the size of my fricking legs. Most people looking at him would never think this monster of a man was also brilliant, but he is. The calm, cool type that almost never loses his temper. But if you wrong him, God help you. So Dad goes to Lowe's and buys the fanciest pretty mailbox they sell. He then proceeds to install it on top of an 8-foot-long cylinder of 3-inch diameter hardened tool steel. But he wasn't done there. After digging down with post holers and dropping it in, he then filled it in with quickset concrete. To really sell it, he then used some strips of 1/2-inch wood to cover the steel core of his now indestructible mailbox of doom. Primed and painted them so it would look like a standard 4-inch post, and even had my mum decorate it with flowers and such. He wanted it to be as tempting a target as possible. It didn't even take a week. I went out for school in the morning and found the mailbox right where it should be. Attached to it was 30 feet of chain and an entire hitch assembly. Ripped right off the truck's frame, sheared the bolts. It was marvelous to behold. The sheriff gets called over and dies laughing when he sees it. He went to the house of the guy that was suspected and sure enough verified the damage to his truck matched. Fun fact, messing with a mailbox is a federal crime, as in you go to federal prison. Dad was unofficially rewarded by the sheriff's department with a few cases of beer and some venison. And after that, every deputy in town would flash him a thumbs up whenever they saw him. In short, Guy was pulling mailboxes with a chain attached to his truck. Dad makes invincible mailbox, Guy goes to federal prison. Awesome. Don't mess with engineers, kiddos. They have all the knowledge they need to be trap architects. There's a reason it was my favorite Team Fortress 2 class back in the day. I imagine all of us would pay actual money to have both road and driver camera footage of the incident. I don't even understand what the perp was looking to gain. I mean, he was presumably a grown man if he owned a vehicle of that size and was liable for a prison sentence. We're not even talking about drunken teens here. This is just so strangely malicious. Prison seems harsh, but hey, he was definitively guilty. Tailgate and honk on a single-lane street? How did that work out for you? This happened a few months ago as I was driving my work van, the biggest Mercedes Sprinter you can drive without a commercial license. I was zipping around Amsterdam delivering groceries. This story takes place on a single-lane road with high curbs on both sides that take you from one neighborhood to another. Speed limit is 50 km per hour, although it could have been 70 in my humble opinion, except in some tight corners. Now, I've driven here so many times before that I feel comfortable doing 60-ish. Just a bit faster than normal without the risk of getting caught speeding in an urban area. Suddenly, I hear a loud beep behind me and wouldn't you know it, it's a BMW. What a surprise, I think to myself. I was quite impressed by my ability to guess the brand of this automobile, because everything forward of the rear doors wasn't visible in my mirrors. The tailgating and honking continues for a little while until I spot the perfect opportunity to teach this IKEA pencil-equipped D-bag a lesson. A long straight section in the road. For those of you who haven't been to the Netherlands before, our government loves two things: taxes and using those taxes to build speed bumps. As such, we have a wide variety of speed bumps, and this straight section was equipped with my personal favorite, the bus bypass variant, a trapezoid block just wide enough that a normal car has to pass over it with at least one wheel, but a bus can pass over it unobstructed. I've had plenty of practice with these obstacles and line up for a flawless pass while accelerating to a mind-numbing 70 km. The BMW was still glued to my rear bumper. I pass over the obstacle without the slightest inconvenience. The oblivious Beamer driver, however, hits it in the worst possible way, launching himself into the ceiling of his car and grinding his oil pan as the suspension compresses. After that, he kept a good distance. Am I the jerk? Yeah, screw all tailgaters. If I could deliver the punishment that guy received in this story to everyone who's ever followed me, I would be a much less irritated man in my day-to-day dealings. Let me tell you. I mean, sure, he might have back and neck problems after, but he, and I guess the author for that matter, were both breaking the law and endangering other people by going over the speed limit as it is. The tailgater just happened to be the much bigger, worse jerk in this circumstance. Count yourself lucky, author. Am I the jerk for giving my friend first aid on a sensitive area? This happened the other day. I, a 23-year-old male, which is relevant for this story, was at a pool party at my best friend Greg's house. There was also a slip and slide set up and people were using it. My friend Amy used it and screamed. The whole party turns to her and she's clutching her chest and there's blood just pouring out of her hand. She had slid over a rock and cut herself. I'm in nursing school, so I run over to her and ask to see the cut. She pulls her hand away and I see that it doesn't look too serious, but it definitely needs attention. I turn to Greg and ask him if he has a first aid kit and he says yes in the bathroom inside the house. So I walk Amy into the house and grab the first aid kit. I pause for a second and ask her if she's okay with me helping her with this or if she wants to do it herself because of where the cut is. And she says, "No, I trust you and I want your help." So we go into the bathroom and wash out the cut. I look more closely to make sure it isn't serious. I put some Neosporin on it and bandage it up nicely. Amy thanks me and we go back outside. A couple of women come up to Amy and ask if she's okay. And one of them, Sarah, gives me a dirty look and they kind of lead her away. I go back to where I was sitting and Greg sits next to me and says, "Some people were talking crap out there. I did my best to defend you, but I figured you should know that they were talking crap about you helping Amy." I asked him what he meant and he said that Sarah was saying how it was creepy how I sprung into action when I saw an opportunity to play with a girl's memory. And a few of the other women and one guy agreed and were making fun of me. I was pretty upset about that, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I just ignored it for the time being. Later that day, though, I was sitting by the fire pit and Sarah was sitting across from me. And nobody else was around the area, so I asked her why she was making fun of me for helping Amy. She said, "I guess that was a little mean of me. I'm sorry that I did that, but I just thought it was kind of weird how you saw her tot was hurt and you ran up and insisted to help. I know you're in nursing school, but I think you should have let a girl handle it. We all know first aid too." I thanked her for her apology, and I don't like confrontation, so I just said, "All right, I guess I'll just keep that in mind from now on." I think I did the right thing by helping my friend in this situation, and Sarah was really kind of a B-word here. Also, I realized that Amy might not know they were talking crap about me, so I'm going to call or text her and inform her about all of this. Okay, so update. I called Amy and I asked her how the cut was healing. She said it was healing well and she was keeping an eye on it. Then I asked her if she knew about the things Sarah and those others said about me and what Sarah said at the fire pit. Amy had no idea. She said the other women were asking her if she was okay and what happened and all, but she assumed they were just worried about the injury, not my helping her. And Amy was really annoyed and went to the friend group chat and tore the people that were talking crap a new butthole, especially Sarah. Sarah and the others apologized to me in the group chat, but Amy kept going and said I shouldn't accept their apologies because they sat back and talked crap on the one person who stepped up and helped her. Amy also asked Greg not to invite Sarah to the next pool party, and Greg readily agreed. A few of the others tried to say that was too far, but Amy just told them to shut the frick up and do something next time someone's hurt instead of just sitting on their butts and insulting me. Greg followed through on not inviting Sarah to the next party. She was upset about it, but accepted it. Then 2 days after that party, she called me and asked if we could meet in person and talk. I said okay and we met at Starbucks. She looked really sad and apologized to me profusely. She said that she doesn't know why she said those things about me. She thinks she was ashamed of being frozen in fear when Amy got hurt, and she just took out that shame on me by insulting me. But that it was incredibly messed up to do so, because accusations like the ones she threw at me, even if they were jokes, could ruin my entire career, and it was so wrong of her to do that just because she was ashamed of herself. She seemed genuinely remorseful, so I forgave her, and we're friends again. I told her I'd talk to Greg about letting her back to the parties, but she said not to. What she did was super effed, and she doesn't want to come back until Amy forgives her too. I said, okay. We hugged and I went on my merry way. A couple of days after that, I'm hanging out with Amy at my house and we talk about the Sarah situation. Amy forgave Sarah a few days after that and she was invited to the 4th of July party 2 days ago, on the 3rd. We had a great time. Sarah was a little awkward at first at this party but quickly cheered up once we assured her that the drama was behind us, and we accepted her apology and quickly moved on to joking about it, including Sarah pretending to slice open her chest with the dull side of a butter knife and saying, "Hark, mine tender chest, it doth been sliced open like a ripe melon. Whomstever will save me?" ripping off her bikini top and leaping onto my lap, which, to be really honest here, firmly put the issue to bed because everyone at the party was laughing for a good hour about that. So yeah, everything worked out in the end, really. I just wanted to put a cork in this story because when I saw it on TikTok, I realized how much people enjoyed it and thought it would be prudent to let people know that it had a definitive ending. In short, things worked out and we're all friends again. Hey, you know what? I feel like this issue resolved well enough. People made mistakes, took ownership, bridged gaps, and everyone was back on track for a good friendship afterwards. You even got a topless woman in your lap at the end of the night. I'll say that's a win-win. You got your reputation back, everyone's pals again, and they all know that you're a good bloke for helping out when it was needed. Drinks all around. See you next time, folks. Slumlord took my $300 deposit, so I redirected his website to his main competitor. I rented a little house from a man who owned a painting business. The power was off when we came to see the property, but he assured us everything worked and even put it in the contract. The place was dirty and poorly maintained, so we negotiated the security deposit down to $300. Turned out the heat and air didn't work along with the refrigerator and dishwasher. I asked him to have someone look at them, and he cursed me up and down. He called and left threatening voicemails. He'd show up unannounced and let himself in. On one of the visits, I showed him the crawl space was flooded and was a breeding ground for thousands, if not millions, of cockroaches and mosquitoes that would come up through the floor vents. There was absolutely no ductwork, even though he claimed the heat and air worked just fine. He accused me of causing the flood myself, even though I showed him the source was a pipe that had rusted through. He refused to address any problems and said, "If you don't like it, then you can move. You can't pay for a bargain and expect to live in the Ritz." This man was a terrible man in general. Once he hired someone off Craigslist to cut down a tree in the rental property's yard. That man worked literally all day for the agreed $150, cut up and hauled off the tree. He came back that evening, just standing in the yard. I asked if I could help him. He said he was waiting for the owner to get paid. The owner kept replying, saying he was on the way, but never showed up. Our neighbor told us he'd punched the previous renter in the face and refused to pay him for a day's work for his company. He'd bragged about renting to illegal immigrants and not having to do anything because they wouldn't sue. We had a newborn baby, so he called his bluff and agreed to find a new place to live. We left the home in much better shape than we found it. He said he'd mail us the security deposit, but never did. He dodged my phone calls until one day he called to say, "You aren't getting it back. You broke the contract when you left early, so go frick yourself." I was really upset because we were new parents and had very little money. That $300 was a big deal to us and a drop in the bucket for this man. He owned an upscale painting business and had 15 rental properties. The next week I was online leaving negative reviews for his business when I clicked a link and noticed his website's domain had just lapsed. I knew what I had to do. I immediately bought it, then created a homepage with contact info for his biggest competitor. I emailed him from his old domain, asking if he wanted to buy the website for $320, the cost of the security deposit plus the price I paid for the domain. He was irate. He started calling my work, threatening to sue my employer, and he even contacted my parents and threatened to sue them. He left a bunch of threatening voicemails for me, saying he was going to beat me up and he knows where I live and he has my social security number. I received emails from several review sites asking if I was trying to update the contact info for the business. He must have used his old domain's email as his contact email. I didn't want to get in trouble for impersonating his business, so I didn't respond. That contact info was never changed. I received a few emails from potential clients. I called him and told him about the painting job requests. I gave him the contact info for one of the clients to prove I wasn't just making it up. I told him it was the last time I was going to do that for him and suggested he buy back the website in order to not miss out on any other jobs. He told me he was taking me to court. I told him I'd recorded his threatening phone calls and saved all his texts and emails. He said he was going to sue me for illegally recording him. That's not illegal in my state, by the way. And I said I look forward to seeing you in court, where I countersue and press charges for treating me like this, and I hung up. He called back and cussed me out for hanging up on him. I said, "Call me back when you can speak respectfully to me," and hung up again. I repeated this about 5 times, and each time he was more angry until the last time. He spoke respectfully and explained that he hadn't gotten a single job in months. I suggested he focus more on creating a website to find a business. He lost it and cussed me out again. 6 months passed and he still hadn't bought the website back from me. I got a call from him begging me to do the right thing and give him the website back. I told him the current price was $350. 6 months later, I get another phone call. I told him the current price at that point was $380. Eventually, he texted me to say, "I went out of business. I hope you're happy." I responded, "I hear having a website really helps your business. $380 and it's yours." He told me what a terrible person I was and said, "Karma's a B word." I responded, "Maybe if you stopped trying to rip people off, your karma wouldn't be so bad." That was the last time I ever heard from him. The major business listing sites confirmed his business did indeed close. I renewed the domain for another 2 years just in case he was bluffing. A few months later, I drove by his office to see if it was still there. It was empty with a "for rent" sign posted. I never got the $300 back and spent money on domain registrations, but it was totally worth it. In short, Slumlord unjustly kept my security deposit, so I bought his website. I put his competitor's contact info on the homepage. I offered to sell it back to him for the price of the security deposit. He refused and threatened to sue me repeatedly. He wound up losing his business. What level of stupid pride was this man displaying here? He had already lost. He likely had $300 lying around, but instead of just paying up and getting a bailout, he'd rather just stand in his sinking ship and scream at you? There's such a baffling lack of self-awareness here. How can you punch tenants, leave your laborers unpaid, brag about screwing over your migrant workers, and have the gall to tell someone else that they have bad karma? Insanity. Height approved. This isn't my story, but my parents'. It was probably the first time I witnessed malicious compliance, and I still remember it well. It was about 25 years ago, so I was about 8, and we'd just moved into a 150-year-old house that was in need of major repairs. My dad, thinking ahead, knew he'd need a large garage and workshop to really get started on the renovations properly. On the edge of our yard was an ancient barn that was falling apart and needed to be torn down. My dad figured this was the best place to build his new workshop, so that was the plan. We met and were on good terms with all the neighbors at that point. When the plans for the new workshop were finished, my parents went around to all the neighbors as a courtesy to show them the plans and get their blessings. The neighbors whose property the current barn and new workshop would border, I'll call them the Peters, were concerned about the height. The existing barn was 16 feet high and they asked if we could only build it 1 story, 12 feet at the max, so as to not block the sun in their yard. Sure, no problem, my parents agreed. They wanted to go 2 stories for extra storage, but just 1 wasn't a deal breaker. So the old barn was torn down and the foundation laid for the new one. During that time, there was a falling out with the Peters and my parents. I'm not sure what happened, but it turned nasty. One day, my brother and I were playing street hockey, and Mr. Peters came out yelling at us, "Get off the road, you half-breed craps." My dad is black, so we're both half-black. You have to earn your place in this town. Upon hearing this, my mum had to physically restrain my dad from going over and beating the living crap out of him. Eventually, he cooled off and started on his plan. The plans for 1 story went out the window. Soon, the new garage that was only supposed to be 1 story soon gained a 2nd in the blueprints. If they were going to direct racist comments at his kids, my dad would build what he wanted. As construction started, the Peters came over to ask why there were 2 stories being built and were told to go F themselves. We didn't hear from them again until the roof started to go on. The bylaws of the township limited all structures to 24 feet in height. The Peters called the township and then a building inspector, claiming that the new garage was over 24 feet high. If it was over height, the entire thing would have to be torn down and rebuilt, costing us tens of thousands of dollars. I remember the Peters standing there, watching the inspector with smug looks on their faces. 2 days later, we got the final report card back from the township and the inspector. 23 feet 11 inches, just as my dad had drawn up in his new plans. He set me up on the roof of the garage, just plywood, no shingles yet, with some spray paint and had me write 23 feet 11 inches, height approved, in 2-foot-high neon orange letters across the entire roof, facing their yard and house. Not only did the garage block all sunlight from reaching their yard, but my dad waited until everything else was done before he shingled the other side of the roof. They had to stare at those neon orange letters for almost 3 years. We didn't hear a peep from them for the next 10 years until they moved. Yeah, that was well deserved. I wonder what switch got flipped on the Peters to make Mr. Peter go full-blown racist. Seems like that's a pretty good way to set yourself up for failure when you've just highlighted to your neighbors the one thing they could possibly do to annoy you on your own property. I will say that it was darn risky building to exactly 1 inch below the allowed height just to get maximum irritation out of your neighbors, but if annoying them was the aim, then mission bloody accomplished. Screw racists, big win for you guys. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. With apologies to anyone who sews. I was raised by my evil grandparents. My grandfather isn't worth mentioning, and my grandmother died when I was 15. She had an aneurysm while on the loo, dying with the same grace she had while alive. I'm now in my mid-30s and I don't often think of her, but I do keep one small petty habit. Grandmother was a seamstress, and her most prized possession was a pair of super sharp, fancy, expensive dressmaking shears. I once used them to cut paper, and she made me sleep on the porch for a week afterwards. And for those who said this seems like a random punishment, this was something she did on the regular. If I was going to be an animal, then I should be treated like one and sleep outside. It wasn't about the scissors, it was about me existing in her line of sight when she wanted to lash out. When she died, one of the few things I asked for were those scissors. I've used them to cut everything but fabric for the last 2 decades. I ruin them in the kitchen, ruin them for crafts, for projects around the house. The other day, I used them as a hammer when I was too lazy to grab the toolbox. It's stupid and petty, but nothing beats the tiny spark of malicious glee that I feel every time I use these fricking scissors to cut duct tape and then pry open a paint can. Here's to you, Nana. I hope you went to heaven because I know there's nothing you hated more than the happiness of others. I should add that it's been 20 years since she died. I've had a lot of therapy, become part of a loving family, and have a wonderful, interesting life. The best revenge I could have. I still have the odd time when childhood trauma raises its ugly head, but even my worst days are happier than any day when she was alive. The scissors are just something that makes me laugh and a good reminder that she can't actually hurt me anymore. Be good to each other, and may you all have health, happiness, and the occasional joy of petty revenge. I hope you went to heaven because I know there's nothing you hated more than the happiness of others, may be among the narrator's favorite quotes that have come up in his job this year. What a fabulous line to give at the funeral of someone you hated. Screw her and screw her scissors. Glad you get some joy out of this revenge from beyond her grave. You're going to bully a little girl and spit water in her face at the water park? Prepare for the tempest. So I took my 2 young sons to the local water park yesterday. They had a blast. I stayed in the lazy river most of the time with them. I tend to stay about 10 to 20 yards behind them. Close enough to keep an eye on them, far enough for them to have fun. I was minding my own business, floating in the lazy river, when suddenly a wild bully appears. Cue a 10-year-old husky boy who's following around a much smaller girl. I'm observing over the course of a few laps of the river as this little turd boy is constantly teasing and intimidating this little girl that's like half his size. I lap them. I'm now right behind victim and bully, my own son's constantly in my view, and I get close enough to hear bully talking trash to his victim, trying to get her to leave the pool. She's visibly scared and trying to get away from him. There are no accompanying adults with these children. This is when I see the bully take a mouthful of water and flat out spit in the girl's face. At this point, I'm like, "You did not," and I go into action. Things are crazy and hectic because we're surrounded by people in a loud water park, so I know I can get away with this. Just loud enough for him to hear me, I say to the bully from behind him, "Hey." Bully turd turns around and I proceed to go full Honda palm, splashing right in his face. After about 6 seconds of splashing Blastoise-level water in his face, bully is coughing and girl is 10 yards ahead near my sons. My work here is done. I proceed to say nothing and pretend nothing has happened. Bully stands shocked, catching his breath in the lazy river as the hapless water-going masses float past oblivious. 10 minutes later, bully is gone and victim has returned to having fun. I think the lifeguards saw me and just didn't care. In short, grown man sees boy-kid bully spitting water in little girl's face. Grown man splashes bully in the face until bully is coughing. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Am I the jerk? Jerk vigilante material for sure. Look, no reasonable adult would ever admit to enjoying bullying a child. But admit it, folks, we've all seen little brats like this and wanted to do something like what this man did. And honestly, in the chaos of the water park, when are you going to have the chance to aggressively half-drown a little crap like this again? Get out of the pool, little crap bag, rethink your life and do better. Am I the jerk for announcing the reason why I didn't invite my brother to my wedding and exposing him to the entire family? I got married 2 weeks ago. I was married before, but it ended after I found out that my older brother Thomas got involved with my first wife. It was devastating because we were close and had a great relationship. I also helped him so much while he was struggling, and seeing how he repaid me hurts me to this day. I stopped talking to him, and Mum and Dad forced me to keep it a secret, and because I was too weak to argue with them, I just kept my own distance. Then I met my now wife. My family loved and embraced her as their own. Mum and Dad treat her like a queen, which helped repair and solidify my relationship with them. However, as the wedding was approaching, they told me they expected me to invite Thomas. I of course refused, but they kept guilting me about what the relatives and other guests would think and say when they don't see Thomas there. I fought them about it till the day of the wedding. Turned out they'd invited him behind my back, but I found out and stopped them in time. They came to the wedding looking angry, asking what they were going to tell people when they ask about Thomas. I told them I'd take care of it, and what I did was take a moment while everyone was paying attention, grabbed the mic and flat out announced this and said, "The reason I didn't invite Thomas to my wedding is because I was worried he'd steal my now wife just like he stole the first one." I said it playfully to not make it sound so tense, but most of the guests looked shocked and started mumbling. Then it went awkwardly quiet for a moment. Then we all moved on, but I saw Mum and Dad walk out while looking at me grudgingly. Later, they started lashing out about how I exposed Thomas and caused him to be shunned by the family in the most hideous of ways. I told them that I already said I didn't want him there, yet they tried to push him on me repeatedly, saying, "What are people going to say?" So I told them the reason why he wasn't there in a playful way, but they, the guests, still got the message. Mum started yelling about how everyone will look down on them and shun Thomas. She called me pathetic and cruel for punishing him and gradually ruining his life despite him apologizing and trying to reconcile, but in my opinion, some things are just unforgivable. We've been on horrible terms since then. Am I the jerk? My wife said at least now they're off my back about what people would say about not inviting him. Not the jerk. Look, if they were purely concerned about repairing the relationship between you and your brother, I could maybe have some sympathy for them. But it honestly sounds like they're exclusively concerned with the reputation of their family. I think it's a bit crazy to upstage your poor wife at your wedding by bringing up that your brother stole your first wife like that. Okay, so you think the people you're married to are just waiting to be stolen? I wouldn't be surprised if she was less than thrilled with you, but from your account it seems like she's on your side, so what do I know? Today I messed up by showing my college friends a picture of my mum. It was a pretty normal day at university and a conversation came up about our parents. A friend of mine, who we'll call Jenny, shows us a picture of her father, so I pull up Facebook images of my mother and father. A friend of mine saw my father and said I looked just like him, but when he saw my mother, the color in his face drained. The man, who we'll call Chad, watched me scroll down my pictures of my mum and then asked about my siblings. He then described them in perfect detail. Perfect detail. He then said to me, "Lily, I think I effed your mom." I laughed, of course. Chad has a reputation and I figured it was a joke until he described my siblings, my mother's home, the neighborhood, and a few other things. I felt horror. Sheer horror. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I looked at him. Just a few days ago, he was flirting with me and whatnot. And now I find out he's a mother fricker, a literal mother fricker. In short, college friend effed my mum, described her and my family in detail, and had been trying to put the moves on me days prior without realizing I was her daughter. Mother fricker. To clarify some more things, apparently he found her through a hookup ad. She had someone watching my siblings while she took him to the bone zone, so the bed I've sat on has mum and Chad juices on them. He asked me to call him daddy now, and I feel homicidal. To clarify, my parents haven't been together for as long as I've been alive. My mum has not had a long-lasting relationship throughout my life, and I kind of blame myself for that. I say this because I was never an easy kid. I was bitter and sad, and no one wants a woman with a child that doesn't receive the necessary mental help to thrive. My mum and I also don't have the best relationship either. I always felt she was a bit envious of me due to the fact that I've been able to maintain a relationship longer than she has at my young age. While I'm a bit frazzled at the prospect of my friend doing my mum, I guess I can't be mad at him because he genuinely didn't know. A little ways down the road, we'll both laugh at this. My Giga Chad Sigma male friend will not end up sleeping with me though because I'm deeply into someone else. My partner said I should also F his mum to assert dominance. Update: I F'd his dad. I'd been plotting hard and I did it. I F'd his dad F'd me on Chad's childhood blanket. I don't know if that last bit is a joke or a reference or what. If it isn't a joke, then at least this will be an easy one to judge. Everyone here is to blame, nobody is doing great, you all deserve each other. You might be the worst if you revenge F'd his dad though, at least Chad and your mum didn't do anything to hurt you. He maybe should have kept that to himself though. I did all the work and then faked a flat tire and let them present alone. I'm in a class where a group research project/presentation is a huge chunk of overall points. Everyone knows in group projects you always have that one slacker who doesn't do anything that you have to compensate for. However, I got stuck with possibly the 3 worst people to be in a project with in the class. I did the entire research, presentation, poster boards, among many other annoying things myself. I tried talking to them and telling them they needed to put in their share of the effort. I was ignored. I'd send them tasks to do, ignored. I'd try to schedule meetings, they'd say they were coming and then leave me alone at the library. This happened from the get-go. It was abundantly clear that they expected everyone else to do the work, but everyone else turned out to be just me. As a rule, we couldn't have things 100% memorized word for word, and we couldn't read off anything. We actually had to know the subject. I was fully prepared to do most of the talking, and even wrote down a small script for them and told them to know what to say during their part at the very least. The night before, I told them we had to meet to at least go over the whole thing one time. Once again, none of them showed. The professor had stated at the beginning that we were not allowed to contact him about people slacking off in the group, and said to work it out amongst ourselves, said that we were adults and that he wouldn't even respond to emails about it. At this point, I'm livid and decide they can just do it themselves, which means they'd get up there and not know a damn thing to say other than the small info I gave them, and couldn't even bullcrap anything because they did no research. The thing is, if we miss without an excuse, we fail the project. If you have an excuse, you have to have documentation. I commute and live an hour away, so I decide that I'll conveniently have a flat tire right before class. I went out and actually bought a tire so I could have the receipt to prove it. Emailed the professor who said I can present by myself during his office hours. Turns out they completely bombed and not only failed the project, but since they're bad students, that might even make them fail the class. Too far? Am I the jerk? You are a jerk. A magnificent jerk. Seriously, I feel like you're living a dream that literally everyone who went to university has had. I'll say that at least most of my useless project mates showed up to the meetings, even if they contributed nothing. So maybe them not even bothering to look the person they were screwing in the eye was the extra straw that broke the camel's back. Also, the fact that a presumably poor student was willing to shell out the cost of a tire just to see other people fail is a testament to their fury. Well done, dear author. I will forever dream of having done what you did to those lazy idiots who are destined to be useless middle managers of life and drag the rest of us down in our group projects. Accuse me of theft. Enjoy waiting on your packages. So I have a neighbor behind me. We have almost the exact same addresses. Mine is 123 Sesame Street Boulevard East, and theirs is 123 Sesame Street Boulevard. Now, we've lived here 5 years now. We constantly get their packages, mail deliveries. One year, the Christmas light company put their lights on my house. This is a common thing. Usually, when things come here, either me or my husband loads it up and drives it over, and we leave it on their porch. No big deal, it's about a block. Well, one day, the wife came over and made a big deal about how she was missing her meds, and she needed them, and how they were tagged as delivered. I tell her I'll keep an eye out, but I haven't seen them. 2 days later, her husband comes over with a package of mine and tells me he's bringing my mail because it's the moral and illegal thing to do. The whole time he's getting louder and louder in front of my next-door neighbors and some company. So basically, he's yelling at me in my yard and insinuating that I'm a thief. After that, screw him. Every single letter I get that's addressed to them, I toss back into our Dropbox for the mailman to take. Packages? I've driven them 10 minutes down the road to the UPS store so that they have to be reprocessed. All because I don't want them trying to say we stole some crap when we've always just dropped things off at their house. Yesterday, the wife comes over and accuses me of taking a big check, a driver's license for her Marine son, she dropped the word Marine no less than 4 times, and a credit card. She tells me repeatedly that they were scanned as delivered to my house, which is BS. They don't note the address of where something was delivered, they just mark it as delivered. She also tells me that she had our mailman open our mailbox, a community bank of them, to make sure none of their mail was in there. So now, instead of just tossing letters back for our mailman to take, these are being driven down to the post office too. Not only that, I'm taking them to the UPS store. They have a post pickup, but only twice a day, so instead of the letters being taken back to the post office and being resorted, now they'll go through UPS first, then the post office, delaying their delivery at least another 3 days. Late update, I just went out to check mail for the day to a big sticker on the inside of my door that says, "Last name only," in big black marker. I also sent an email out to the post office, though I don't think anything will come of it. I still plan on calling on Tuesday. Am I being the jerk with all this petty revenge? Not the jerk. This is one of those cases where helping the person out was easier than the steps that you ended up taking later, but you were prepared to do it sheerly because the idiots that you were dealing with were so damn unpleasant that it felt better to go through a longer process to make them seethe a little bit longer. Seriously, if they thought that you were wholesale stealing their stuff, why wouldn't they just call the cops on you? Since they can't actually have had all the paperwork scanned to your house, just demand proof. This lady won't have it, otherwise she'd be at the cops. Who knows what these people want? Attention? Excitement? I swear we'd have 75% less content here on the channel without bored or paranoid idiots kicking crap like this off. How I made $2,000 off a crystal dealer. A few years ago, I was married to a degenerate tweaker. She originally wasn't like that, but Crystal does what Crystal does. I kept interfering with her tweaker lifestyle, trying to get her treatment, and she rewarded my efforts with a restraining order. She lied, said I beat her, and other overly dramatic stuff. So, I get kicked out of my place and end up in a studio apartment with nothing but my toothbrush and the clothes I was wearing. One of her great plans was to get a front for a ton of smack using everything of value we own as collateral. Her dealer literally took everything and put it in a storage unit somewhere in town. The wife planned to stomp on the dope, sell it, and by the weekend be a millionaire. Tweaker logic, Of course, she throws the plan away and ends up just doing the smack, so now all of our expensive stuff is in the wind. I tried to work out something with the piece of crap dealer, but he wanted an absurd amount of payback, plus I made some threatening comments he didn't appreciate. So negotiations stalled. Eventually, I catch wind that he got locked up and that some friends took all his property and put it in storage for safekeeping until he got out. I hit every storage place in town with my story and his picture, hoping to catch some kind of a break. Eventually, I find the place. The owner tells me that the unit is going up for auction next week for non-payment. He tells me if I just pay the 3 months back rent that he'd write it up as I won the auction and I can have the unit. $320 gets slapped on the counter and we go drill the lock. All my stuff is there, and what do you know, I now own all of his stuff free and clear. And because I'm a nice guy, I dug out all the personal irreplaceable stuff like old photos, important documents, boxed them up and gave them to his mum, who I found on Facebook. Actually made quite a bit of money off the deal selling his crap on Craigslist. Came out about $2,000 in the black on the deal. I'm divorced now, have all of my stuff, and I'm happy. Well, all's well that ends well, for you at least. Seems like a bunch of other people in that story are destined for a very sad, rough future unless they turn their lives around, but also none of that is really your fault. There's a lot of inability to predict consequences in this story's antagonists. What could possibly go wrong with having a ton of a substance that you can't resist sitting in your place waiting for sale? What's the worst that could happen if I don't have someone put down the money on the storage place I eventually plan to make loads of money off the contents from? The author actually ended up doing the dealer a massive solid by giving him all the documents and stuff back. He'd have lost that otherwise. You're all right, author. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Today I messed up when Alexa reminded me in the middle of a dinner party that it was time to bonk my wife. So this happened last night and we're just getting over the laughter. My wife and I are early 60s, and because of old age, menopause, among other things, our bedroom life has needed medical intervention and a new treatment was suggested to alleviate my wife's pain during the deed. So 10 days ago, jokingly, after a few bottles of wine, we set an Alexa reminder to announce when the treatment had run its course and we could officially get to it. We set a reminder, "David, it's time to bonk Fiona." It seems like bonk didn't trigger Alexa's censorship. So, fast forward 10 days, we'd totally forgotten this, and last night, in the middle of a dinner party with several friends, we get the reminder, "David, reminder, it's time to bonk Fiona." As you can imagine, confusion reigned, and after a pause in the dinner party conversation, questions were asked, and our friends joined in on the good humor, as we're all of similar ages. Pro tip, everyone gets old, things don't work as well as they once did, but please try and keep your sense of humor. In short, during a dinner party, Alexa announced, "David, remember to bonk Fiona." We'd forgotten that we'd set up a reminder 10 days earlier while drinking a few wines to remind us that enough time had passed since my wife had started her new treatment to sort her soreness during the deed. Everyone laughed once it was explained. Terrific. I've been caught out when my friends have gone on my phone and set weird, incriminating alarms for inconvenient times, and seeing the self-inflicted version of that is brilliant. This story is from 2 years ago, and honestly, the narrator is pleasantly surprised that a group of friends in their 60s can be as good-humored and open about this stuff as they all were. I feel like my generation are, if not forthcoming, then very accepting of the facts of life with regards to the bedroom, and fairly open about the fact that, people bonk, as the author so charmingly puts it. And we don't need to hide the fact that we do it. I kind of just assumed that the boomer generation were generally more close-lipped about the fact that anything like this happens around some of their friends. Am I wrong? Tell me, older viewers, how much do you talk about your bedroom lives? Would you be able to have a chuckle about something like this, or would you all be absolutely mortified? I'm curious. You invited us camping, so that meant you were supplying everything. Went camping this weekend with group of friends. Not our usual crew, but a bunch of them said they wanted to go and wanted to learn about how to camp. Okay, sure, no problem. We discussed logistics such as sleeping arrangements, food, dates, activities. Among other things, we gave them a list of things they needed to bring, and if they didn't have those things, they should let us know. We got to our camping location a day early and set up. Chilled, had some good food. It was nice. The rest of the camping group shows up, and 2 of the people literally just have the clothes on their backs. I offered to help find them a spot to set up their tent since it was supposed to rain the next day. They said, "You didn't set that up yet?" No. Where's your gear? You invited us camping. You were supposed to bring everything we needed. Guys, they literally just had the clothes they were wearing, nothing else. I called the rest of the group over to discuss this, pulled out my phone and verified they'd been told to bring stuff. I even showed them the texts and asked why they didn't say anything in the group chat about not having camping supplies. You said you had spare stuff, so we didn't need to bring anything. Yeah, but you had to tell us so we could bring it. They were super angry when we didn't give them our main tent. They had to sleep in ragtag, thrown together spare stuff that everyone contributed. I had 1 spare sleeping bag, no extra air mattress, so they were basically sleeping on the ground. Everyone chipped in a few spare clothes, warm socks, and even spare boots, since it was so cold at night. Buddy never did get both boots back, just one. We have no idea where the other one went. They became children, literally incapable of doing anything without supervision, complaining, or losing something, and expecting everyone else to find the lost thing. Oh, but you bet your butt those 2 brought green herb. Got high as all heck. Then got caught going through my frickin' cooler for food and had the audacity to complain about the terrible snack selection. Yeah, I'm celiac, motherfrickers. My main snacks are literally hidden because a box of cookies costs $5. Cue my crying wallet. So no, I don't have a bunch of snacks lying around for the Doobie Brothers. These guys even expected me to feed them for 3 days and wanted better snacks for next time. I always buy too many eggs, so thankfully I made omelets 2 days in a row, which one guy refused to eat, asking if I could make him something else. We told them to just go home at this point, but we were camping 6 hours away from home, and they didn't want to drive all the way back without actually getting to camp. These guys are usually pretty stellar, but it seems like it just took the right situation to see their true colors. They began to ask about our next camping trip and where we plan to go, and if we plan to bring any ATVs or boating stuff for that trip. My answer? No! The narrator has had these friends before in certain activities in life, and the narrator then, as a rule, limited his contact with these people after the activity where this complete lack of agency came to light. There's nothing more wildly disconcerting than seeing one's working, adult, tax-paying friends turn into children who are unable to think for themselves and who do nothing to pitch in without being barked at by me. I wish we had the age of the two troublemakers in question here, because the older I get, the more I realize that certain people keep their teenage characteristics well into later life. I'm not kidding, I've met people in their 30s like this. Although, the two in this story would be the first green herb-addled silly billies outside university that I'd seen, if they were that old. Malicious compliance versus pro-revenge. Like any good story, we need a bit of backstory to set the stage. High school sucked because I was a forever friend-zoned nerdy gamer guy. So I decided for my senior year I was going to get out of Ohio and study abroad. I slept through 3 years of German, so I applied to go to Germany. Ended up getting placed in Salzburg, Austria, which is the most beautiful place on earth I've been to date, and I need to visit again soon. The study abroad place had a few warnings for the next year before I left. Don't get in criminal trouble, don't get crap grades, and don't fall in love. My only danger with the first one was my lead foot. I totaled my first car, but was allowed to drive my old man's 95 Ranger, 4-cylinder, 5-speed, and it barely got out of its own way. The second one, I did enough to get C's and B's without caring much. And the third one, nope. Through some angsty teenage drama that is the story for another time, I ended up meeting, dating, and falling madly in love with my now wife and mother of my daughter. I was 17, worked full-time over the summer, and as stated, my old man lets me borrow his truck after I get off work. The rules are I have to be home by 10 on the weekdays and 11 on weekends. He justifies that if I broke down or whatever, he'd have to come and get me and fix the truck before he had to leave for work at 6. To my turbocharged hormones, this is tyranny. I spend every moment I'm not at work with my girlfriend because women's chests and making out are awesome. But summer is quickly coming to an end and I have to leave the country. The last day before I have to leave, my old man eases the restriction and says I can have until midnight to be home and can be gone all day. We leave for New York City the next morning at 10 a.m. This is when I hatch a plan. I'm leaving the country, so I can't be given a worse curfew or extra chores, and my family wouldn't throw away the study abroad money unless it was dire. I spend the whole day with my girlfriend and tell her to wait up after I leave. I have a surprise. I drive home and make it there at 11:58, creep into my room and spend the next hour AOL instant messaging her. At 1, I roll the truck down the driveway and head back to her house, fall asleep with her in my arms, and life is perfect. I knew full good and gosh darn well I was breaking the intent but not the letter of the law. My argument was that my old man never said how early I could go to her house. I never woke up before noon, so it was just left unsaid. Perfect malicious compliance in my head. I wake up at 9, just enough time for a teary goodbye to haul butt back home to head to New York City to fly to Vienna. But I look out the door and the truck is gone. I panic and realize I'm a dead man. My trip is off. I'm going to have to work all the hours to pay my old man back for a stolen truck and wasted trip. I'm never going to have time to see my girlfriend and I'll never experience Europe like I wanted. I call my old man in this panic to hear him answer with deafening silence upon hearing the news. Now, for my old man's pro-revenge. He had heard me roll in just before midnight and went fully to sleep. He did not hear me roll out at 1 because years of playing Dungeons & Dragons taught me how to be a good sneaky archer type. But when he woke up at 6 and saw both the truck and I were gone, he knew there was only one place in the world I could possibly be. So he and my stepmom drove over to my girlfriend's with the spare key and took the truck and went home. When he got my call a few hours later, he gave a full 30-second beat and then began yelling and told me I'd better find his darn truck or I was never going to see the outside of my room again, much less my girlfriend or Austria. I was freaking out, running around her neighborhood asking if anyone had seen the truck, about to call the cops, when he calls back 5 minutes later, laughing his butt off. He tells me he stole the truck and I was in deep crap and I'd better be home fast. He makes me get a ride home with my girlfriend and her mum. When I arrive, he's standing in the driveway, smug as all heck. I get berated for an entire 6-hour drive to New York City about how big of an idiot I am and leave the country as planned. It all works out in the end. I got the girl who I'm happily with 17 years later, and the truck until she died of Ohio rust 12 years later. In short, I maliciously comply with curfew only to leave an hour later. My old man extracts pro-revenge by stealing the truck and making me panic. This is the first time where the narrator gets to label someone other than the protagonist as the jerk vigilante. Your dad did quite a mean-spirited and calculated thing to scare the crap out of his disrespectful and sneaky son. In the end, no harm done, and lesson probably learned by our author. I can't imagine the conversation the narrator had to have with the girlfriend's parents, though. In my mind, this is America where the punishment for having consensual, happy fun time with a teenage girl your own age is punishable by death. At least as far as your prospective father-in-law is concerned. Maybe this girl's mother was more chill. I can't imagine the stress of a potential ruined international trip being amplified by all of the parental judgment for your hormonal teenage activities. Clap, clap to Dad, you magnificent jerk, and congratulations to our author on your long and successful relationship. Bridesmaid ruins a wedding with her announcement, so then her bridesmaids ruin her wedding with their announcement. Last summer, I was at a cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from the newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid, who I'll call Sarah, and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife, I'll call her Emma, didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but she kept grinning and acted very happy for the other couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. I wasn't there for it, but my cousin sent me some of the best bits on Snapchat and explained the whole situation. This is where the fun begins. Emma's two much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in their basket to blue ones she'd secretly brought with her. She told her sisters not to say anything about it or let the bride see them until it was time to scatter them down the aisles. Sarah looked very confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme. But of course she didn't say anything about it in the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids were also Emma's friends and had attended Emma's wedding and were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up catching a whole lot of crap for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen, and at first she showed some pre-approved humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and other friends to facilitate a couple of light-hearted jokes. Then at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones originally planned. That was when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant, and that she had just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals. The last slide? Her ultrasound picture. There were shocks and yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loudly that I sincerely regret watching the Snapchat recordings with headphones. Apparently Sarah had been very nasty to her bridesmaids before, driving several of them away and forcing others to pay ridiculous amounts of money for dresses. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle, I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore. In short, self-important bridesmaid announces her engagement at my cousin's wedding, stealing the spotlight from him and his bride. Said bridesmaid foolishly names my cousin's wife her maid of honor and behaves like a complete bridezilla. Cousin's wife sabotages her wedding to announce her own pregnancy. Is Sarah the jerk? Yuck. Yeah, this is another one of those cases where everybody just sort of sucks here. Except maybe the poor wedding planner who got torn a new one for having all their careful work undone. I'd say although Sarah absolutely is a jerk, given how it sounds like she behaves to everyone, you could probably put her stealing the spotlight at Emma's wedding down to being dumb rather than intentionally ruining things. Kinda just feels like Emma's really just let this whole thing simmer too long and probably could have just put her energy into other things. Really gross, everyone. If you don't like each other, just don't be friends. Do better. Cheating while we're engaged? I'll exploit your phobias. A while back, I was engaged to a guy who seemed like a good choice. Attractive, funny, good job, owned a home. I learned he had a bit of a downside though. He was a cheating slimeball motherfricker. Not just a one-time, one-night stand with co-workers after too much of a drink, which I would have still been angry about, but might have been able to get over. His flings were repeated and with more than one woman. I picked up on a few cues, but eventually I had things confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt. I was venting to my brother about this and told him about how I planned to move out while the butthead was out on a week-long business trip. He volunteered to help me before I asked, and then got this amazing devious grin on his face. "We can also leave a memento for him," he said. When I asked what he meant, he said, "Pennywise and his friends." You see, the Wick Dipper was scared of clowns. Not just a little uncomfortable, but freaking terrified of them. Even as a grown man, a clown on a TV show, webcomic, or book would freak him out and he'd have to change the channel or click away. My brother owns a print shop and is protective of his little sister. So, in the couple of weeks leading up to the Butthead's trip, he printed off dozens of pictures of clowns of various sizes, ranging from really small wallet-sized ones to big poster-sized prints. We framed most of the stuff in some super cheap plastic frames. Others we laminated. We managed to move all of my stuff out pretty quickly, which gave us a lot of time to get things set up for my ex. We took down every single framed picture and put up framed clown pictures. The clowns ranged from average clown to nightmare fuel hellspawn. Pictures on the walls, art prints, photographs in frames on tables. You name it, it was replaced with a clown picture. Where we became really devious was taking the laminated ones and placing them in things like silverware drawers, the underside of the toilet lid, so when he went to take a leak he'd be greeted by some nightmare fuel clown when he lifted the seat, in the fridge and freezer, on the back of cleaning bottles, in his underwear drawer, and a bunch of other places. We even made sure to put some in places that he wouldn't go into for a while, so he'd get scared months later. He had one of those attic accesses that you have to pull down and a ladder descends. We put a big laminated clown face on there so when the ladder flipped open for him to climb, he'd get a clown face. While we were setting this up, I went a step further and changed the wallpaper on his desktop computer to a clown. I also took about 10 of his favorite movies that he had on DVD and replaced them with the burned DVDs that had clown footage. They auto-played and we'd printed up labels for them that looked like the original DVD artwork. We put all of his original artwork and DVDs in the basement, off the ground, and protected them from damage, but surrounded by giant clown posters of Pennywise and the like, and a motion sensor that, when triggered, would play a creepy clown laugh. I left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I know about you cheating, frick you, I'm out." After a few days of hard work of moving me out and moving a few clown cars worth of terror in, my brother, his wife, and I celebrated by grilling some steaks and having a few beers. These were paid for by the engagement ring I sold. Once the idiot returned, I got a text message or two that were along the lines of, "You witch." It must have taken him days to take care of the photos out in the open alone. There was never any further action or legal repercussions for what we'd done. After all, what grown man would want to say that his ex-fiancée scared him with clown pictures? Well, I think it strains credulity that you stayed with this man for so long after you found out he was cheating just to get your very specific warped revenge, but if this did happen, it seems like a pretty fitting punishment. Honestly, if you're going to serial cheat on your partner, you deserve a punishment akin to this. As a man who's been repeatedly mortified by an unexpected life-sized cutout in his workplace bathroom, I can only imagine how awful it would be to have something that you actually have a phobia of inflicted on you on a daily basis. Good revenge. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Cause me hassle on moving out? Well, I'll cause you 50 grand in home repairs. This story happened a few years ago when I was still new and ignorant to renting apartments. My landlord was a right piece of work and violated so many laws, but again, I was new to the whole thing, and he knew that and took advantage of my ignorance. I'd lived in one place, which I really enjoyed, and signed a renter's agreement with the landlord. Then, after 2 months, he said I had to leave because I made too much money. I loved this place I had and was paying very decent rent, but he said not to worry, that he owned another building that had an available apartment in it I could move into. Begrudgingly, I made the move out there. It wasn't as nice of a place by far, though it still had the same amount of rooms, a bedroom, and a smaller office, so I figured I couldn't complain. And he charged me the same rent. Though I never signed anything for this place, he literally just switched keys with me. This new place was kind of gross though. Cracks in the wall, black mold growing in certain corners, the bathroom door literally didn't close, the radiator leaked water, and the toilet. Well, let's just say it wasn't the same color on the inside as it was on the outside. As the months went on, I began to notice things were different when I'd come back from work. Sometimes it would just be, did I leave those papers like that? All the way to, there's a muddy footprint in here. I figured out he'd been coming into my place when I wasn't around. This was the last straw, and with the support of my boss, who was also my really good friend, I began looking for a new place with a different landlord. I finally did and told my boss I was unsure if I should put in notice or what. He asked if I signed a lease or papers or anything in that place, and I said no. His exact words were, "Screw it, pack up your crap and move." Therein lies the most stressful move I've ever experienced. I didn't own a lot of things, but what I had meant a lot to me. I'd earned it. I had my best friend there helping me pack up my stuff. My best friend was also my boss's wife, by the way, as well as 2 of their kids. We got through a small amount of loading things up when Mr. Butthead got tipped off. He then kicked my friend off his property and told me that if I left the apartment, he would change the locks and not let me back in. Keep in mind, this isn't before the end of the month and I'd already paid for the entire month. So I sat in my apartment, crying, trying to figure out what to do. I called my boss, who was coming quickly because his wife and kids were there, as well as one of my brothers, and I was scared to leave my apartment as I didn't want to lose any of my things. After my reinforcements came, the landlord backed off, and I quickly got all of my important things out of there, though I made sure someone was always inside the apartment at all times. Before leaving, however, I took some quick pictures of the mold and cracks and other disgusting things around my place. A few days after settling into my new place, I went to City Hall and the Health and Safety Board and showed them the pictures. Turns out they were just as interested in them as I was. Nearly a year later, I came across one of my old neighbors from inside the building, an older lady that had lived just below me. We made quick pleasantries and then she asked if I'd heard what happened after I left. I said no, as my new place was in the next town over, so I didn't even frequent the neighborhood anymore. Apparently, thanks to the lovely pictures I sent in, my landlord was investigated and was forced to do just over $50,000 worth of repairs on the building. Always good to have a clear-cut villain in our stories here, and landlords just so often fit the bill perfectly. Moving you to a different, less nice building because you earn too much? Sounds like he wanted to get you to pay the same amount in a gross apartment that nobody else would even consider moving into. And revenge aside, you definitely did everyone else a favor by getting City Hall involved on your way out. Your landlord would have been legally obliged to fix the issue, and the other tenants would have benefited as a result. Plus, maybe he'd be more careful about getting on his tenant's bad side afterwards. Try to save 0.01 seconds on the subway? Wait 30 more minutes for a bus. I was at the subway station a couple of days ago, getting back from university. As I got off the subway to line up and go up the escalators, this middle-aged lady nudged me out of the way just as I got on the steps and made me trip over and fumble my bag. She stared at me and went on her way. I was right behind her going up, and she probably saved about 0.01 seconds getting on the escalator before me. As we made our way to the exit and got up to the doorframe, she went out of her way to nudge past me again. She gave me another stare as she went through the exit and stood there looking at me like she couldn't believe I tried to go first or something. There's a bus terminal that connects to the subway on the street level, and we ended up waiting at the same stop. She was first in line and I was right behind her. When the bus finally arrived, she really took her time fumbling through her purse, talking on her phone and looking for her Presto card. As she was searching for this card, she ended up dropping it right at the tip of my boot. She was still busy talking on the phone while searching through her wallet. I thought about it for a second and decided to lightly slide her card underneath the bus with my foot. Eventually, she realized that she might have dropped her card. So she packed her wallet back in her purse, hung up the phone, and looked around for her card. As she looked, she began getting increasingly worried, scanning everywhere for where she could have dropped it. I nudged her out of the way, gave her a stare, and made my way onto the bus. I sat myself happily on one of the seats. I saw her flustered and panicked, as the next bus was coming in half an hour. The bus started to depart and I opened the window and told her, with glee, maybe you should check under the bus. I watched her for as long as I could until she was out of sight, and enjoyed the rest of my commute home. I'm a jerk, right? Apparently Presto is the Toronto transport card. If so, this might rank among the top 10 most hostile attacks ever to take place on Canadian soil. So you're notable for that at least. This might be the most petty story I've read in a while, but it is very funny, so thank you, author. I doubt our antagonist learned her lesson, but it's fine. We all need villains in our life, and she probably fulfills that role in many people's lives, one little nudge at a time. Today I messed up by visiting my bat-crap crazy family in Oklahoma. As some backstory, my wife was scheduled for a business trip, so I decided that during her time away I'd go visit my family. Since they live in the United States' thickest concentration of crystal heads, the great state of Okla, run and don't look back Homer, I knew it would be a chaotic visit, but I had no idea what exactly was in store for me this time around. After letting my mum know what dates I was coming for the visit, I started getting some weirder than normal texts. Now, usually, texts from my family go something like this. I read online that snorting hydrogen peroxide is good for your health. Or, we're taking out a loan to buy a chateau because the jacuzzi we just bought doesn't fit in the house. Mind you, both of my parents are broke, refuse to apply for jobs, and are largely living off my siblings' incomes. But this time I got a flurry of text messages accusing my wife of secretly bullying me. The reason these messages were so odd is that my family has known my wife for over 10 years, and she is literally the sweetest person ever. And ironically enough, my parents are the ones with the past history of mistreating all their kids. Verbally, emotionally, physically, and financially. And my angel of a wife has consistently loved and supported me through the PTSD aftermath of growing up with those crazy people. So after reassuring my mum that my wife is still the same sweet and non-bullying person as always, my mum started going on about secret knowledge she had and wouldn't tell me what it was. Finally, I just chalked it up to her being bored and trying to start crap for entertainment purposes. So, fast forward to the actual familial visit. I woke up exhausted and decided to treat myself to some coffee at a local shop. The one I was going to was about a 5-mile drive from where my parents live. But I'd been so stressed out from the usual family arguments and gaslighting that highway hypnosis kicked in and I ended up a half-hour away. Realizing I'd have to drive half an hour back, I went ahead and called my mum to let her know so that she wouldn't worry. Shortly thereafter, my sister calls me. She goes on about how highway hypnosis proves I'm unhinged and delusional. She says I must have something wrong with my brain and need immediate medical attention at an ER. But not the closest ER to me, the closest ER to her. She lives 2 hours away from my parents. My sister says I need to see Dr. X and have him sign paperwork to get me checked into a mental ward for my own safety. When I tell her she's overreacting and that I'm perfectly okay, that it was just me zoning out and going on autopilot for the drive, she tells me she and my mum have been noticing my worsening pattern in my cognitive behavior for a while. I ask what behavior, and she won't actually give me a clear answer. Anyway, I get back to my parents' house and go into their guest house to finish my coffee and send a few emails before fully starting the day. Except I hear a noise in my mum's office, next to the room I'm staying in, so naturally I decide to check it out. Spoiler, it was my mum's cat knocking down a folder full of papers from her desk. Going to pick the papers up, something catches my eye. My name. On paper after paper, there was my name. On an involuntary civil commitment needing a physician's approval signature for indefinite commitment. Power of attorney going to my mother upon my involuntary commitment, proxy divorce papers to be filed on my behalf against my wife, and written statements by my family that my wife had mistreated me and they were therefore requesting annual alimony to be paid to my soon-to-be power of attorney for the remainder of my involuntary commitment. My blood ran cold. Of all the ways to extort my wife for money, they were trying to get me locked up for life in a psychiatric ward to do it. I called my wife, packed my bags, and left without saying goodbye. I just wanted to add these updates in the days following. The reason I felt it was okay to leave the cat is that my parents treat her like a cat goddess. I think it's common with a lot of narcs that they're able to love pets and plants unconditionally, but not their own kiddos. Also, this isn't the first time they've tried getting me committed, sadly. In high school, a decade ago, we were having a big fight and my parents tried forcing me into the car to take me to an ER to be committed. Also, I had to use the bathroom in the middle of the fight. They followed me to the bathroom to continue fighting with me and ended up physically dragging me off the toilet. I realize most families aren't like this and I should have gone no contact a long time ago. Narcissistic families screw with your head pretty badly and I still deal with bad bouts of guilt that make me think I'm in the wrong and need to make amends. I'm applying for a new social security number and changing my name. My social security number has also never worked properly, so it might not even be a real one. Thanks to everyone who wrote in with advice on things I hadn't even considered could happen. I do appreciate it, and I'm sorry to everyone who seems like they've gone through the same things as me. You don't deserve that crap, and I hope you're able to live a happy, stress-free life. In short, my mum and my sister tried getting me committed to a mental hospital to gain power of attorney, file a proxy divorce, and steal my wife's money. Good Lord. What else is there to say about this one? Continue as you seem to be doing. Leave, never contact these people again, and document everything negative they've ever done so that you can prove that their testimony isn't to be trusted. They're a bunch of leeches who are purely after money, no matter which kids they have to throw into underfunded sanatoriums to do it. So why not choose the one who got away from them, I guess? You're better off without them, author. My girlfriend stole my money, so I ruined her life with one video. I'm a senior at a large state university. This happened in the first semester of my freshman year. I was selected for an honors-type program that placed me in a co-ed dorm building with every student in the program. As a dumb freshman, I rushed into a relationship with a freshman girl who lived right above me. We'll call her Megan. It was convenient for me to date someone who lived so close, but everyone else in our building hated Megan because she talked a lot and almost exclusively about herself. She bragged often about being a fairly aggressive person, but somehow I overlooked that mile-wide red flag. Right after Thanksgiving break, at the end of an evening class, I got a call from my mum, who noticed some unusual activity on my checking account. Back then, I had no credit card, so this account or debit card was my only access to my savings while I lived on campus. I rarely needed to buy anything during the semester, so I was puzzled to find that $104.29 had left my bank account over 2 weeks, in the form of 6 Grubhub food orders. At this point, I trusted Megan, but I decided to ask her about the money right away. She denied any involvement and suggested that I cancel my debit card. After a really long phone call to the bank, I did just that. Next, I reached out to Grubhub customer service on Twitter. Hey, my card was stolen and used for food orders on those dates. Can I have the receipts? They sent me the first and last receipts, but they had to redact the personal info of the account holder. I say redact in quotes because they just used the Snapchat draw tool, and Megan's name was still clearly visible on both receipts. What's more, the most recent receipt was only 2 hours old. She was probably still eating when I chopped up my debit card. It's worth noting that she and I both had unlimited dining plans, paid for by our respective parents, and we lived 500 feet from the nearest dining hall. She didn't need to order food, and she definitely didn't need my money to do it. So I texted her again, "I have the receipts from Grubhub. Are you sure you didn't make those orders?" Her reply, "Frick you for suspecting me." Fairly aggressive, wouldn't you say? I hatched a plan to collect security camera footage of her picking up the order from that evening. However, by midnight, Megan arrived at my door in tears and confessed to everything. Plus, she admitted to being a serial shoplifter. Exhausted, I sent her away and decided to deal with everything in the morning. By the next day, everyone in our building seemed to know what was going down, probably because Megan had already begun broadcasting her version of the story. I sent Megan a breakup text and decided that the $104.29 was a loss. At least I escaped unscathed, right? Well, less than 2 days later, she entered my room when I wasn't looking. I was sitting at my desk when I noticed her standing silently behind me. "Give me my stuff. Where's my stuff?" "What stuff?" "You know." I didn't know. She tore through the room looking for something that she refused to identify. Just as quickly as she came, she was gone. I locked the door because obviously this wasn't over yet. Within a minute, she was back. She stood outside my door, knocking and demanding I let her back inside. The knocking quickly got more violent. She started shouting, "I know you're fricking in there," and "Open the motherfricking door." Mind that we lived in this building with students in our program who all know each other and all of them could hear her. Pretty quickly, Megan was rattling the handle of my door. Next, she began throwing herself at it, shoulder first, trying to break it down. I lived next door to my residential advisor, but judging by the lack of any intervention, he was elsewhere. So I whipped out my phone and texted him to send backup. Meanwhile, I saw my heavy wooden door bending and buckling. I even heard it crack a bit. My RA was on duty in another building, so he sent 3 of his colleagues to de-escalate the situation. They brought Megan downstairs where she revealed that the stuff she wanted was just the t-shirt and keychain that she gave me for my birthday. Whatever. I let her have those, I still just wanted this to be over. However, once I shared my story with the resident life staff, they filed university paperwork to place a no-contact order between me and Megan. They also recommended I contact campus police, who then told me I should get my stolen money back in small claims court. But I couldn't even get there without a car or money to pay for an Uber. Sorry, Judge Judy. At the request of the campus police, I also contacted the Title IX office at my school, sending them the story of everything you've read so far. They were interested, to say the least, although I didn't want any trouble. I just wanted a clean breakup and a fresh start. But a Title IX representative informed me that they were bringing 3 misconduct charges against Megan: theft, threatening and violent behavior, and inciting an intervention by university staff. The representative asked me to serve as a witness in Megan's disciplinary hearing the next semester. I tentatively agreed right before the representative set me the hearing date for February 14th, Valentine's Day. I thought it was a joke, but they really did that. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, the no-contact order was still in effect, but a few of my friends had kept tabs on Megan. For starters, she failed all of her classes in the fall. Someone in my math course confessed that Megan had tried to sleep with him while she was dating me, and he had to repeatedly tell her no. Even worse, Megan kept telling a twisted version of the whole story to try and turn my friends against me. So when I found out that she had found a new boyfriend, it felt good to know the V-Day disciplinary hearing ruined whatever evening plans they might have had. I arrived alone at the disciplinary board office, unsure of what to expect. The board consisted of grad students, and the hearing was expected to run into the night. Unlike me, Megan did not come alone. She brought both of her parents as character witnesses. That wasn't even a thing here. This wasn't a real courtroom, as you'll soon see. And that's not all. Megan's parents also paid a lawyer to defend her against the charges. The board knew that was unnecessary, but Megan's parents believed so strongly in their daughter's innocence that they'd already paid this 3-piece suit to make her case. In the name of fairness, the board members offered me pro bono legal representation, a junior economics major who we'll call Jimmy. Jimmy had already read my account of the events from the fall and thanks to my screenshots of Grubhub receipts, he said there was an okay shot of the charges sticking. Then I told him something I'd kept secret for months. When Megan tried to break down my door, I whipped out my phone to text my RA, and I'd also filmed the whole thing. Jimmy couldn't get enough of the video. There was Megan, kicking and screaming and clearly trying to break into my dorm room. It was all the evidence I needed, and no one saw it coming. In the hearing, when the time came for me to make the case against Megan, Jimmy played the video on a big screen in front of everyone. The room went insane. In that instant, I realized that Megan had really convinced everyone that I was the liar. In her version of the story, I gave her permission to buy food using my account. She told her parents that she had asked me politely for her belongings, which I'd rudely hidden from her in my dorm room. In Megan's story, I was the sociopath trying to ruin her reputation. Before I unveiled the video, it was her word against mine. I still didn't want revenge, even after finding out that Megan tried to cheat on me. But when I saw her parents flipping out at the video, "Why didn't you tell us that you did this?" and her lawyer raising hell, "This evidence was not provided in pre-trial disclosure," and a board member standing over him, "Sir, this is not a court of law, please return to your seat," and him shouting, "Objection!" and her replying, "We don't have objections, this isn't a court of law," and Jimmy, my new best friend, just trying not to laugh out loud. That's when I realized how good revenge can feel when it's fair and deserved. The board found Megan responsible on all 3 charges. My side of the bench recommended the university terminate her housing contract and force her to pay restitution. Her side recommended only restitution and reprimand. The board compromised. Her family paid back most of the money she stole, most because 2 of the 6 orders had the same price, and the lawyer convinced the board I'd duplicated an order. And Megan was forced to move into a different dorm building. This probably would have helped her anyway because every student in our program's building knew everything she had done and lied about. They wouldn't speak to her and no one wanted to be her roommate. By the time she had to move buildings, she'd already failed all of her courses again, and having paid for her tuition, her unused dining plan, her lawyer, and her restitution, Megan's parents finally pulled her out of school. Where are they now? Last I heard, Megan returned as a part-time student, but I never saw her again, because the no-contact order still stands. I'm now Facebook friends with the guy Megan tried to seduce. Oh, and Jimmy and I connected on LinkedIn. As for me, well, I no longer date fairly aggressive people. In short, my ex stole money for food, lied about it, tried to break down my door, lawyered up for a university hearing, got caught by video evidence, lost the support of her parents, lost respect of her friends, and left campus. So the narrator was under the impression that big evidence reveals like you see on television just don't happen because of the discovery process that normally occurs in a court of law, where all documents and footage are examined beforehand, like the lawyer alluded to in this story. I guess this shows that no such rules need apply in the arbitration or mediation process, and you can have all the dramatic bombshells that you want. Maybe I need to go and watch some of these if I want some real-life drama. But yeah, Megan is the jerk, both to our author and to everyone else in her life. I know how expensive tertiary education can get in the United States, and she does not seem like the kind of person who gets a scholarship, honestly. So she put her folks out a bunch of money as well as all the other horrible things she subjected her peers and partners to. At least her folks will be watching her closely from now on, and she won't have them on side if she tries to slander future partners. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Entitled Dad Picks Up Shark and Ruins Day for Everyone. Hi, I work at an aquarium as an educator and I see a lot of crap. On this particular day, it wasn't too busy, but we're still dealing with COVID, so a lot of things are closed at my aquarium. We're working on opening everything, but it's hard. I was working the Shark Touch station. Now, these particular sharks are nocturnal in the wild and tend to take naps during the day. As a side note, if you don't know, not all sharks have to swim to breathe. These sharks don't, so they're typically laying on the bottom of the tank for their naps. I like to explain that when people come up and see that they're not moving. On this particular day, we were kind of busy and the sharks were having their afternoon nap. A family came up and noticed the sharks weren't moving. So I came in with, yeah, so they're asleep and that's totally normal, but if you have long enough arms, you can try to touch them. But keep in mind the water is cold and they're at the bottom of the tank. The dad nods and reaches into the tank, poking at the shark hard enough to wake it up and thus making it move to the other side of the tank. The dad looks at me, irritated. Now what? Well, you can wait for them to wake up and come to you, or you can move to this section. It's a bit deeper, but there are a lot of sharks there to touch. He rolled his eyes and moved his family. At the new section, it was too deep for the kids to reach and they were starting to throw a fit. When this happens, I like to offer them other things they can do or tell them other animals are up ahead and always say they can come back to see if the sharks have moved. This guy was not having it. He started throwing a fit, saying it was unfair that the sharks were asleep while people were wanting to touch them. I explain the normal stuff I say when people get upset, which only upset him more. He then proceeded to reach down, grab a shark by the tail, and lift it out of the water. I was bewildered. I see people push the sharks and try to move them on a normal basis, but no one removes them from the water until today. I didn't know how to react. They don't train you for this. I say, sir, please put the shark down. They need to live in the water. My kids will touch this shark. I panic. Sharks and other animals can die from stress, and this shark was not having a great time. I quickly call my lead, and as he's rounding the corner, the man drops the shark, causing the other sharks to wake up and become agitated. The entitled dad takes off to the next exhibit with my lead not far behind. I call the animal care team and essentially close down the touch station until I get the okay to open it. It didn't open the rest of the day, which caused a lot of angry parents the rest of the day, but that's for another story. I think my lead caught the dad and kicked him out, but not without him demanding a refund for the lack of things open and the lack of fun they had. I don't know if he got it. He probably did. We're known for handing out refunds for the dumbest things. I was too busy focusing on the animals. The sharks ended up being fine and we were able to open the station the next day. So my note to everyone, please do not pick up the sharks at your local aquarium. Thanks! Okay, I've got an update. I got in contact with the lead for that day and asked him what the consequences were. He said we hold a 2-strike policy and gave the dad a warning. He came in the next day and got into an argument about the mask policy with the executive manager of the aquarium. He spit on the floor and was then escorted out by police, more than likely charged. He was then put on a ban list, and we did not give him a refund for that day. It brings me all the satisfaction in the world to know that this man didn't get any of his money back after his crappy behavior. Let's just throw the advice of the working experts to the wind and distress an innocent animal for your own gratification. And it goes without saying, of course this absolute crock of number 2 was an anti-masker. Because if you're going to behave like that much of an absolute inconsiderate jerk at the aquarium, why not just apply the same attitude to everything else as well? A ban well deserved. We can only hope that the kids see their dad being banned from everything and learn the correct lessons, because he sure as crap isn't going to. Neighbor had my brother's car towed on our property. I'm pretty annoyed because this happened just a few hours ago. So just to give a rundown of the people involved, there's me, my neighbor, who from here on in will be referred to as Nosy Old Bat or Knob for short, and yes, she's an entitled boomer, as well as her husband, who's fairly nice, and my brother, who we mention rather than being directly involved, as well as my grandmother. For some backstory, Knob and I both live on corner houses next to a busy street, which is relevant to the story, and oh man is this lady bordering on insane. I've lived in this house my entire life with my grandmother. I'm 28 and where I live it's hard to live on your own, especially with the pandemic going on now and being temporarily out of work because finding work that's disabled accommodating is a pain, especially when you have asthma and people are paranoid that an asthmatic has COVID. I get it, but it's tiring to explain that no, I don't have the virus, I have asthma, and I can't infect anyone with my bad lungs. Knob did used to watch me for a little bit when I was 6 years old until my aunt could pick me up to babysit me. This apparently has given her the mindset that she can attempt to control my life and tattle on me to my grandmother, who nowadays knows when I have company and if a friend parks in the driveway. I'll just call her or text her to let her know and ask her to let me know when she'll be home so I can tell my friends they need to move their car. Unless Grandma tells me that it's fine and she'll park on the other side of the street, which she does occasionally even if there's no one in the driveway. This should all be a non-issue, right? Not to Knob. She's been known to get up in my business and go and knock on my door and demand to know who's there and if I'm doing the nasty with those friends. I'm asexual, so it's hilarious to me when people ask if I'm sleeping around, but it's infuriating when Nob asks this, because she's nosy as frick and thinks she practically owns the neighborhood due to the aforementioned corner houses and acts as if this is an HOA. It's not, thank God. And like she's in charge of her imaginary HOA, as should we be because of our house on the other corner. She makes calls on other people's behalves constantly. We're no different. Anyway, stage dressing aside, here we come to the story. So, my little brother is a Marine and is currently deployed in Hawaii. And his car has been on our property for a while now because, well, he can't come and drive it since he's in Hawaii. This apparently gives her the idea to call a tow truck because it hasn't been moved since he left it. It's not even a terrible looking car either, but I guess it annoyed her that it was sitting there due to it being a car she didn't know. My grandmother's now dead truck has been there longer, but Nob knows whose it is because she's seen her drive it. This happened between the time my grandmother and I left for Costco and the time we got home. Nob called the towing company to tow my brother's car because, in her batty old boomer logic, after my grandmother went over to her house to confront her, it's been over there for 2 weeks and is just sitting there. On our property, not hurting anything. Her husband, the nice neighbor, as crotchety as he can be, was unaware that his wife did this because he likely wasn't home, so he had said he wasn't sure when he talked to us. So now my grandmother has to call the police and the towing company to get the car back, and she's rightfully furious, as am I, about this, because it means another towing fee that was completely unnecessary. She can't even get it until tomorrow because nothing is even open. She was met with voicemails of the towing not even being open either, which was bizarre before 7 p.m, but whatever, I don't know the towing hours, since we haven't had to deal with that before. I absolutely hate Nob with a seething and unholy passion because this isn't the first time she's attempted this garbage either. She's done this on other neighbors because she thinks she can police the neighborhood because of her corner house logic. I don't care how rude this makes me, but I will not be paying that towing fee, and I will not be letting my grandmother pay it. Nob will be paying that because it's none of her business to be nosing her old face into things. I don't care if you're old, you don't get to stick your nose in someone else's business and life, especially if the thing in question is on someone else's property. I'll take this woman to court if she refuses to pay, because she had no right to do this. I mean, what was my brother supposed to do? Be all like, oh hey guys, it's been 2 weeks, let me go back to my grandmother's and drive my car around the block. I'll be back on Monday with all the flights. Yeah, as if his commanding officer would allow for that just because of Nob. I'll give updates if anything further happens because, yeah, I'm furious and I don't really care if the old woman doesn't want to pay it. She will or she'll face court for her nosiness. Okay, late update. My cranky and tired butt marched over to her house, she was awake and outside, and I ripped a new one into her about keeping her nose in her own stuff and having to pay for the towing, or I was going to take it higher up and nail her for illegally having it towed. She's paying for the tow truck, if reluctantly. I haven't slept, thanks insomnia, you're a pal, so I have no Fs to give about being cordial or polite with this BS. Entitled people need to mind their own damn business and leave people alone. Am I the jerk? So the narrator did not see this actually working out in the author's favor, to be honest, at least not right away. I was getting ready to comb the replies to see the court battle and see this woman be forced to pay up despite her never coming to terms with the reality of the fact that this was actually her fault. So color me surprised. She's a jerk, but not beyond reason? In any case, she just kind of sounds like your typical bored, cranky old neighbor in an urban apartment. Probably needs a couple of other wake-up calls like this to put her in her place, or more ideally, a hobby of some sort so that she's completely distracted from similar non-issues. Maybe if you get similarly angry at her next time she pokes her nose into your bedroom life, that'll put a stop to that as well. It's not really any of her business, even if you have multiple new partners a day, sometimes often at once. And on that high note, have a nice week, folks. He used our kids against me, so I exposed his food stamp fraud. My ex-husband, Brian, was and is a toxic, controlling narcissist. Classic case. Our divorce was very bitter, but I tried to be fair. splitting custody and giving him a decision-making authority under the assumption that he would be a better father than he was a husband. Things went well for about a year. I got a new boyfriend who was great to both me and my kids and wanted to be involved in their life. When Brian found out my new boyfriend, Tom, was going to be attending my kids' fall festival at school, he went off the deep end. He abruptly decided he wasn't going to watch the kids while I worked anymore. He also refused to let my friends or family watch the kids and said he had to meet them first, but then he had refused to do so and claimed he'd sue me for going against the custody agreement, since he had decision-making authority on it. If I got a babysitter, he didn't approve. I lost 2 days at work scrambling to find any place available, which was difficult because of the school's location they attend. He began asking the kids to call him every night, which is fine, but if we were eating or busy doing something and I told him it would have to be later when they call, he'd rage and threaten to sue me again. He began asking me at all times where I was with the kids. One day I went into work for 3 hours to clean up some things I missed due to a storm. I left the kids with Tom since waking them up at 4:30 a.m. seemed needless. When Brian found out, he raged and threatened to sue me. He threatened to apply for child support even though we split custody. He raged about every little thing. He didn't bring the kids to the Christmas school play because he knew Tom would be there. He fought me over medical appointments for the kids and refused to pay his share because he didn't agree to the appointment. And of course, he'd threatened to sue me. He wouldn't let me have the kids during his time, even to let them attend birthday parties or sleepovers with friends or family, something we'd been doing for each other with no issues up until that point. This went on for about 2 months before I snapped. I hate when parents are willing to hurt their kids over their own egos. He kept threatening to take me to court and I was fed up with the empty threat. So first, I wanted to make sure he couldn't afford to fight me in court. Brian was on food stamps. I knew it was only because he was claiming to pay his other ex-wife rent. She still owns half the house and he still owed her half the value. I sent his ex-wife a message asking her if she was getting rent from him, and she said no. I sent that letter to DCF and they closed his food stamp card and sued him for fraud. Then his ex-wife turned around and sued him for her value of the house, since he was claiming to have been paying her all along. Then I sued him to modify the custody agreement and take out all of the things he was using to make my life so difficult. I had screenshots of every nasty thing he had sent me. I had a letter typed by his lawyer stating that he was looking for another job since I wasn't paying him and that's why he couldn't watch the kids. So if he tried to get child support, I could prove he was capable of finding more income. I had medical records and receipts showing that I'd paid for everything for the last year of the kids' health needs. I had records of things he said to the kids about me. I had pictures of them looking filthy when I picked them up from his house. I had receipts of everything I'd spent on the kids for the past year. He folded pretty quickly and cannot come after me anymore, and he's still paying off his first ex-wife. We are civil to each other at this point, but we give each other a lot of space. It keeps the conflicts to a minimum. Not how I wanted things to be, but alas. Am I the jerk here? I don't think you have to worry about coming off as the jerk. Even if we were to come at you from the most cynical angle possible, the fact that this guy was seemingly defrauding and falsifying information to everyone while leveraging the power he had for no other purpose than making your life as difficult as possible makes it pretty hard to sympathize with him. And even if he was just out to get you, his kids were suffering the consequences as well. It was they who were withdrawn from friend and family social events and were also kind of at risk given that he was just withholding financial contributions from doctor's visits and things. The author doesn't provide any information into how long his shenanigans kept going, but I can't imagine the kiddos being thrilled with him even after 6 months of this. Then again, people like Brian generally don't hold back on feeding their own narrative to people, even if it's their own kids and their relationship with their mother is at stake. So hopefully he didn't do too much damage to mum and kid's relationship. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Accidentally impersonated a police officer. So, a while back, I was coming home from a Halloween party. I'd gone in a police officer costume for no reason other than that they let me keep the costume when I'd played a cop in a safety video at work, so I didn't have to spend any money to go to the party. Plus, it was very high quality, convincing, and realistic. A network TV show had donated some old costumes, since we do a lot of charity work with kids. I'd had a few too many, and by the time I left the party, I couldn't really tell you what I was dressed as, or where I was coming from, or where I was headed for that matter. I was just on autopilot, stumbling back to the bus stop to go home. As I was making my way, somebody seemed like they were flagging me down. They were yelling, "Hurry, hurry! There's a couple fighting and I think she's about to stab him. You have to come quick!" Still on autopilot, I ambled over in their direction. I wasn't in any big rush, so the girl was really floored and kept yelling at me. And I'll be damned, there was a fight going on. I wanted to say to the person who flagged me down, "How considerate of you to clue me into this awesome fight so I can watch." But I wasn't feeling articulate enough, so I just kind of gave a thumbs up and watched the two people screaming at each other. It was a young man who looked as though he'd just been woken up and come down from his apartment, and a woman who was dressed for the clubs but looked a mess. They were screaming at each other, and she kept shoving him and making threats like, "It was always $50. Are you going to let me have to frick you up over $50? While the guy just kept saying, "I'm not going to argue with you, I'm not." It seemed like people were looking at me, but I didn't have the slightest idea why. Finally, the person who flagged me down said, "Well, are you going to, do something?" I was baffled and a bit flattered, but also confused. I was trying to make sense of the situation. Was I somehow involved in this altercation? Did I know these people? Did I cause this fight? But it was clear everyone expected something of me, so I decided the best course was to fake it until I made it. I charged over, doing my best impression of authority, while trying to place the face of either person in the argument. Can't remember exactly what I said, but I'm told it was along the lines of, Hey, guys, chill. What's the matter? What's happening? Let's just talk." As I got closer, I saw the woman was holding her car key between her fingers and jabbing it out like she planned to stab the man with it. I just giggled and said, "Oh, okay, first of all, that won't work. Haven't you seen World Star? Man, how are you letting her back you up with a car key? Come on, she couldn't open a can with those." I don't know the first thing about physical altercations. Sober me wouldn't be the slightest bit emboldened by street fighting videos I'd watched at 3 a.m., but apparently drunk me felt qualified to proffer advice. There was a moment of stunned silence as the bystanders wondered how I could be so ineffective, and the arguing people wondered whether or not I was going to arrest them. When it became clear I was as clueless as they were, the argument continued. Someone in the crowd said, "What? Did you hear that?" And someone else suggested, "We should call some other police, like 911. And I was thinking, what? Yeah, no, of course, I can't believe no one's called the police yet. This is really getting out of hand. Good idea, maybe I should call them. But I got distracted by the guy going, "I paid you what you were owed, so you don't go changing the price," and the girl was shrieking, "Don't bullcrap me, Brian." As she got closer and closer to him, he had to dodge her crazy key hands. So I'm just slack-jawed watching them again, along with everyone else, when someone finally says, "Stop him, she's going to hurt him," while looking directly at me. I wasn't sure why everyone seemed to want me to stop them, and I was thinking to myself, or one of you guys could do something, you were here before me. But I figured I must be involved somehow and not understand why, because everyone kept addressing me directly. Maybe I owed someone money. Maybe I chatted with one of them at the party. In any case, I was like, I've got to hang out with these people more often. They've got a lot more trust and respect for me than my other friends. I was feeling good from all this attention, and everyone expecting me to be able to handle things. Finally, I mustered up the most authoritative voice I could and yelled, "Cut it out with the key. I told you already. That will not work." I had everyone quiet again, so that was a step forward. "Now, what exactly is the problem going on here?" I asked. They started to explain, but they were both talking at once and nothing they said gave me any better understanding as to how I was involved. So finally, I was just like, "How do you two know each other?" And the guy said, "We're friends. We're good friends. She's just overreacting a little right now." In hindsight, the guy probably had some substances on him or some other reason to want the cops, or in my case, people dressed as cops to go away. Because he seemed terrified as he was saying it was all fine. As best as I could piece together, stopping the fight would make everyone happy, so I thought back to how my mum would break up an argument, and I implored them. "Come on, guys, friends shouldn't be arguing this way, let's go. Whatever this is, we're gonna set it aside, we're gonna sleep on it. Until then, I want you to hug it out. Come on." And I started ushering them into one another. I guess the girl didn't really want to deal with people dressed as cops either, because though she begrudgingly put her keys down, she didn't go in for a hug. So rowdy drunk me was like, "Come on, hug, anything could happen. Life is short. You could be dead tomorrow." This poor girl thought the police were threatening to kill her if she didn't comply with an order to hug it out. They hugged, and then I was like, "All right, where are you guys from?" And the guy was like, "I'm staying here at this building here." And I was like, "Okay then, go home. You two need to call off, and tomorrow maybe you'll have forgotten about this whole thing. You two, go somewhere else," I said to the girl, vaguely gesturing away from the building. She started to say something about her $50, but I was tired and ready to go home, so I was like, "Now, you can pick this up again tomorrow. You too, man. Go inside. Get some sleep, it's late." You could hear the crowd whispering in confused awe as I watched the girl leave and watched the guy go inside, just yelling over them if they tried to start up again until they're both cleared out. And then I just stumbled off myself. I went home, showered, passed out, and barely remembered any of it the next day. I just vaguely remembered talking to some people arguing on my way home. About a week later, I went to this friend's house again, and someone was there who'd apparently been in the crowd. They were like, "Oh my goodness, you're the cop who broke up that fight in front of my building. Between you and me, I promise I'll keep it on the low, but were you drunk on the job? You seemed trashed. Were you off-duty or—" I told her I had no idea what she was talking about. The closest I'd ever been to a street fight was watching World Star. She was like, "Yeah, you talked about watching World Star. So did you make them hug just to mess with them, or is that like an actual thing they really teach police to do to de-escalate things?" That got my attention because what were the odds of someone who looked like me being in this area talking about World Star? And I did remember people I talked to about hugging, so I asked her to elaborate, and as she recounted the events, the whole thing started to come back to me. I was like, hey, yeah, that was me, and laughed, focused more on the breaking up the fight part and not really registering the cop part. So my confused body was like, don't pull her leg like that, man, come on. They wouldn't let you be a cop on your best day. And I had to think about that one for a second because he was absolutely right. Finally, I put the pieces together and sheepishly explained the mix-up. We all had a good laugh over it, and I learned to never drink while dressed as someone it's illegal to impersonate, even accidentally, because you never know what could happen. Am I the jerk? Wow. So this gentleman is lucky he didn't get violently attacked, arrested, fined, or any number of things. Great story, though. I don't know that he comes off as much as a jerk as he does a complete idiot, because if you're regularly drinking so much that you can't realize why people think you're a cop in a convincing cop outfit, it's a miracle that something like this hasn't happened earlier. Regardless of how much of a funny moron he is, it's a great story, and he prevented a serious altercation without even realizing he was doing it, and got away scot-free into the bargain. Despite the irresponsibility of the author, I should note that his tactics were closer to the de-escalation tactics that cops use in other parts of the world. So as ham-fisted as his attempts were, his drunken police self was onto something. Now, if we can get a bunch of trained, sober police officers doing this instead of reaching for their sidearms and cuffs, maybe we can adopt more of this stateside when it's appropriate. Am I the jerk for what I told my dad after I got tired of his stupid pranks? My dad has been annoying the heck out of me with this stupid crap for years. He acts like a freaking teenager sometimes, I swear. I feel like I'm more mature than him. My mum's yelled at him a few times too because he also does it to her. He really doesn't know how pranks work or when to stop. It used to be dumb annoying stuff like giant fake spiders or roaches in the fridge or around the house, or hiding in the shower to scare one of us, but honestly, he's taking it too far. Some examples he's done to me for way over a year are taking all of my clothes from my drawer and hiding them all over my house so I can't find them in the morning. He's done this one 4 times. Putting whipped cream all the way inside my shoes so I can't tell until after I put them on. I'm lactose intolerant, so one time he switched my almond milk out before I used it to make pancakes. It had me with mad runs all day. My dad did apologize for that one, but the whole family was mad at him for weeks, so he stopped with the pranks. It's not like we don't talk about it. He says we'll laugh about it in the future, but really I don't see that happening, and I've told him there are other ways to make memories than by ticking everyone off. 1,000,000 times I've told him to stop because all it's doing is making me not want to be around him. All this week I've had job interviews lined up since I'll be able to start working full-time after I graduate in a couple of weeks. I even bought a whole suit and tie to look more professional. Before I was leaving, he asked me to help him take groceries out of the car because he had to go to the bathroom. Instead, he dropped a water balloon on me from the window when I was coming back in. For the first time, I was ready to cuss him out. That's how mad it got me. It made me more angry because he was laughing, recording it on his phone, telling me not to get too mad, and I can use one of his shirts for my interview. It wasn't even that though. This was my own nice suit that I'd bought with my own money. The interview was going to be soon. But I didn't cuss, I just told him that's why he's not going to hear from me after I move in a couple of weeks. And just think about that. He told me to stop being dramatic, but I still kept going. Just so he doesn't wonder why I don't like him anymore, this is why. So he'd better be ready to get blocked after I'm gone. His reaction made me feel good because he was very serious. He didn't even say anything to me when I left or after I came back. Ever since, he's been serious though. He's not even talking when we have breakfast. He doesn't smile and I don't talk to him either. My mum says that I seriously hurt his feelings and I shouldn't say stuff like that when he's just trying to have fun with us. But I'm not seeing how telling him what's going to happen is wrong. I'm fed up. Does it make me a jerk for hurting his feelings in that way, though? Look, the occasional prank is all well and good, but if you're consistently going to ignore everyone's boundaries for that long, you can't be surprised when they don't want to be around you afterwards. This kind of just seems weirdly pathological on his part, if he literally can't stop himself from making the sick pranks, bro. What the heck kind of condition is that, and how can we treat it? Although it might just be a really skewed version of the need to demonstrate control that we see in so many other stories on this channel. Going no contact for a while and hoping that he can see fault or at least just hold in that tendency might be the best thing for both of you. Also, marks against your mum for enabling him, even though she knows full well how annoying it can be. Best of luck. Won't move your patrol car to let the ambulance out? Alright, I'll let your sergeant deal with you. This happened around the 4th of July. There was a small fender bender and emergency services got called out. My towing company sent me out by accident, not realizing that the flatbed at the scene could tow both vehicles. There was one ambulance and 5 police cruisers, with 3 cruisers blocking the road, 1 directing traffic, and then the jerk who showed up after the scene was secured. Jerk felt the need to park his cruiser crosswise diagonally in front of the ambulance. Not necessarily blocking the path, but if anyone has driven an ambulance, they're a pain to reverse around obstacles. The EMTs asked the jerk to move his cruiser, and he literally said, "When I'm good and ready," and resumed chatting with the cop who was directing traffic. Another cruiser shows up, and it's a sergeant who knew me and the company I work for. He goes off to deal with the scene, and the EMTs rush to him to talk to him about moving the cruiser. I see him stomping in my direction, and then he walks to the cruiser, and the door was locked. He called for the cop that pulled in front, and he either didn't respond, ignored, or wasn't aware his superior was there. The sergeant looks angry as he reaches for the radio, but then he looks at me and asks what my drop fee was. 5 minutes go by and he waves me to get the cruiser, so I line up and sting it and dragged it out of the way, and the ambulance drivers waved and left the area. He told me to keep the cruiser hooked because he wanted to teach the jerk a lesson. He walked over to the cop directing traffic and the jerk and alerted him that he was getting towed. Jerk rushes back and demands that I put the car down and that it's not a funny joke, but I reminded him that all tows are fair in the county if the car is illegally parked. He looked at the sergeant and the sergeant reminded him that the ordinance extends to emergency vehicles. I had to look this up. It's not. He tried to negotiate to $40, but my drop fee is $100. He hesitates, but then pulls 5 $20 notes from his wallet, and I put his cruiser down. He got in his cruiser, and he didn't look too happy as he pulled away. The sergeant burst out laughing and said that that kid needed that. He told me he's only been on the force less than a few weeks, and that he was acting like he ran the police as if he was the sergeant. We shook hands, talked about work and Hot Wheels, and off I went $100 richer. In short, jerk cop blocks ambulance and his sergeant got his cruiser towed. This was less of an am I the jerk and more of a, hey, here's a jerk for us all to laugh at. But I enjoyed that and I'm sure our viewers did as well. Nice to end on an unambiguous tosser whose power has gone to his head and who gets dragged sharply back to earth. I hope that he learned his lesson, but you never know with guys like this. Not sure how it would have gone if his superior officer hadn't been on scene. This feels like the kind of guy who could have gone full police intimidation if he thought he could have got away with it. Good thing his sergeant was there. A kid told me I was too fat and too old to play. So I beat him at his own game. Last week, I, a 50-year-old woman, was told by a 12-year-old boy that I was too fat and too old to understand handball. I watched him play with the other kids for a bit, and he was a complete C-word about it all. He had deliberately taunt the younger kids, promised them he wouldn't get them out, and then send devastatingly fast balls at their heads and point and laugh when they got out of the way. He changed the rules so he never got out and blatantly cheated. I inserted myself into the game. He was very condescending and promised to go easy on me, and I smashed that ball all over the court. Low shots, high shots, balls with spin, he didn't stand a chance. The best bit was, after I got him out for the 4th time, all the other kids cheered. I spent the rest of the afternoon teaching the younger kids how to play while he skulked in the corner. It was petty as frick and immature as hell, but it was super satisfying to see him get his comeuppance. Yes, I'm a terrible person, but he was much nicer to the other kids the next day. For those wondering why a 50-year-old is playing with kids, I'm currently working as an out-of-school hours care educator in Australia. I'm talking about handball as in the lunchtime game played by school kids, also known as Foursquare. In this particular version of the game, you each stand in a small square that's part of a larger square. You hit a tennis ball to each other with your hands. The squares are designated ace, king, queen, and dunce. If you're an ace and you get out, you go back to dunce. If you're in any of the other squares, you leave the field and someone else comes in. We don't play dodgeball, that's barbaric. I was both annoyed by his attitude to the younger kids when he won, and by his assumptions about me based on my age, gender, and body shape. Hopefully that answers all the questions. So with all of it in mind, am I the jerk? Speaking as a kid who from time to time behaved like an absolute little sack of crap, I don't think you're the jerk in this situation by taking him down a peg. You didn't insult him, point out his shortcomings, or mock him for his failure, that we know of. You just stepped up to the plate after he said you wouldn't be good and demonstrably trounced him at his own game. And the other kid's reaction only goes to show that this intervention was probably a very welcome one. You didn't take him down by bullying him, you just made him fail at his own form of bullying. That kid was having a little power play and making other kids feel like crap, and you made him stop. And yeah, it was a bit immature, but come on, it felt good. Enjoy it. I wouldn't be surprised if you got a Karen mum complaint afterwards, but I say, worth it. And speaking of Karens, Karen called the police on a 3-year-old. So my neighbor is a complete Karen. Anyways, I thought that I might have just gotten off on the wrong foot with this Karen. Not wanting to be the jerk, I decided to speak with Karen's neighbors on the other side. I knocked, explained who I am, and said, "Do you find that Karen can be difficult?" The nice neighbor laughed, rubbed his hands together and said, "How long have you got?" A few weeks ago, it was the nice neighbor's 3-year-old child's birthday. As per the UK's COVID guidance, they invited one another's households round to have a barbecue in their garden to celebrate. A few hours into lunch, the police knocked on the door. Karen had called the cops on a 3-year-old. They had reports that a ruckus party was happening at this address and breaking COVID protocol. My neighbors explained the situation to the police, and the police apologized for any inconvenience. So, over, right? Nope. Karen reported the family and their friends to the police again, stating suspected child mistreatment. She basically stated that because the children were screeching and screaming, which was just them playing with water pistols, and the parents were being drunk and disorderly, which was also nonsense. Once again, when the police arrived, nice neighbor saw red but managed to keep it together. The police spoke to the kids, who were all happy and just confused as to why the cops kept showing up. They also spoke to all the adults sitting around outside with 2 beers and a half bottle of wine between the 4 of them. Nice neighbor said he has so many stories like this, but he's trying his best to avoid Karen at all costs from fear of chewing her out. I still think the police should have done something to Karen, but I don't know the law. Karen is definitely the jerk here. As the author has stated, I'm not sure what one is technically to do about her. I'm sure that if she keeps squandering police time on her neighbors, they'll stop paying her calls much attention, and I'm not sure how it works with the UK or anywhere else for that matter, but they must have policies in place for troublesome weirdos who do this kind of thing all the time. Your day will come, Karen. I never really thought any of my stories qualified until I remembered one from 2008 or 2009. I can't remember exactly anymore. Quick backstory, I'd recently lost my job, like most people at the time, and was having to do odd jobs on Craigslist just to get by. I recruited a friend to help me do the various odd jobs since he was in a similar situation. We pooled our resources and cobbled together enough equipment to do landscaping work, along with other odd jobs that you'd hire manual labor for. We were both young, like early 20s, and didn't really know when we were getting scammed or fooled. We got a call on one of our ads to do some landscaping work for a guy who happened to live about a mile away. Awesome! We won't have to spend much on gas, but we will have to sacrifice our Labor Day weekend to do the job since it was a large job. The guy asked us to put in a raised bed that essentially wrapped around his entire house. Imagine a house in a newly built subdivision that has a smallish yard and a few trees. He wanted the bed to be built with landscaping bricks and wanted us to copy a style that his neighbor had done. Cool, no problem. We try to discuss payment, but he keeps giving us the runaround. Because we were in a desperate situation, we get fooled into doing the work with no agreed-upon labor fee. This was our mistake and one that we never made again. We were just happy to have some work. We spent 2 full days working our butts off in the middle of summer and not really knowing what or when we were getting paid. We were using our tools, trucks, and time, grinding away, but we kept wondering why this guy was acting so shady. Finally, on day 3, near the end of the day, I was fed up with all the runaround and knocked on the door and confronted the guy about payment. He starts getting all aggressive and starts threatening us with non-payment, which immediately escalates the situation. I grab my friend and bring him into the argument. After about 30 minutes of arguing, the guy decides he'll pay us $70 for the work. Yeah, 70 frickin' bucks to split between us after 3 days of labor. Cool, screw us, right? We loaded up our truck with the tools, then waited for the guy to come around with our cash. This jerk comes out with a huge wad of cash, but proceeds to only hand over 70 bucks. Frickin' C-word. We collect our money and grab our last item, a tarpaulin. We had been using a really large tarp to put weeds, grass, and extra dirt on to make our lives easier since we didn't have a wheelbarrow at the time. The accumulated mound on this thing had to have been 4 feet high. We drag it into the middle of his front yard and dump the tarp. This is the first screw you. He was begging us not to do it, but he could eat a member at this point. We load up and peel out because, angry youngsters. And now for the pro-revenge part. My friend's mum was a real landscaper. She heard our story and offered up some excellent revenge advice. Take the backpack sprayers we had, fill them with a warm saltwater mix, then ride over and spray his yard. We planned to do this about 2 months later. When the time came, we executed the plan late at night, around 2 a.m. We parked down at the pool parking lot, walked down to his house and absolutely bombed this guy's yard. We came back about a month later and everything was dead or dying. Flowers, grass, small trees, all of it. You want to screw with the guys that are doing your yard work? Frick your yard. In short, Guy gives us the runaround on payment for a landscaping job. We do the job anyway and he basically stiffs us, so we destroy his yard secret squirrel style. Well, you definitely took a risk on getting done for vandalism, but let's be completely honest, this guy 100% deserved it for screwing desperate, newly unemployed people out of their money. And even if he has to replace all the plant life and soil there, he might still be winning in terms of the fact that these guys had built some huge planters with brickwork that was probably worth more than the 70 bucks alone, so I have no sympathy for him. I'm very glad that our culprits didn't get caught out, and that they didn't justifiably lose their tempers and clock the guy for being such a massive C-word to them at first. Going in the clinker wouldn't have helped them and their families in the least. Take the win, landscapers. I'm glad you started making contracts after this. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Boss didn't pay me, so I started a company out of spite to put him out of business. The year was 2008, and I was 9 years into operating a landscape company. I'd done moderately well for myself, being able to purchase a home, pay off student loans, and start a family. I employed 4 people during the what I call work season, which for us is March through November. December through February, we lay off our workers and go on hiatus for the most part. Side note, our company focused mainly on maintenance, and in the Pacific Northwest, once all the leaves are picked up from the autumn, there isn't really much maintenance to be done. I had that year developed a relationship with a home builder who hired me to care for his personal home and very much liked our work. He asked us to start bidding on installing the landscapes to the homes he built. Sounds easy, right? Well, remember, we focused mainly on maintenance, so my crew didn't have a ton of experience in the install detail of landscape. And the homes this guy built were not track homes or your cookie-cutter type neighborhoods you find in the suburbs. No, a small home for him was 3,500 square feet on a 25,000 square foot lot, and an average size he developed was 8,500 to 10,000 square foot home, with all the bells and whistles. He was more generous in his landscape budgets than many of the other contractors I'd met, and we were off to what I hoped would be a great partnership. We finished the first 4 projects he handed us, and it was now the beginning of December when my maintenance side of things dropped off. This home builder came to me and asked if I'd like to keep my maintenance crew working for the winter working for him. I knew his next home project wasn't set to break ground until late January, so I asked what he had in mind. He told me that he and his son had been experimenting with spray foam insulation in their homes and had decided to invest into purchasing equipment to start their own company. To purchase the equipment on this level was about $100,000. I said I'd talk to the crew and get back to him. The next week we signed a contract to work with him for 3 months at a specified pay rate for the 5 of us. He was confident he had enough work to keep us busy for the next 3 months. The first job was insulating this incredible house for this plastic surgeon who spared no expense for the gadgets and material that he put into his home. The next was government buildings on Fort Lewis, and the next was new apartment complexes, and so on and so forth. Now, this builder who I was friends with was not my day-to-day boss while insulating. It was his son, who was younger than I and a bit of a jerk, but we got along okay and all seemed well. The father owned the insulation company, but had very little to do with it on a day-to-day basis. I hardly saw him for 3 months. Now, being a contractor myself, I was used to not getting paychecks every 2 weeks like most working folks. I would get paid once a month from my maintenance accounts for the previous months of service, and it didn't all come in at once. Sometimes people forget to pay on time. My crew, though, was used to getting paid in a timely manner. And after the first month of work and receiving no check from my new boss, I inquired when to expect a check. He assured me that once the checks started rolling in, that we would see our money. I totally get how that works, especially for a new company trying to get off the ground. So I paid my guys to keep the peace on my end, and my boss and I worked out an agreement that I would keep track of everything paid and that he would cut me a check once he was able to. I also had an outstanding landscape invoice out with the father of over $10,000 that I wasn't really worried about because he wasn't always super quick about payment. Not that I had to hound him about it, but you understand. Now we're at the end of February of 2009 and it was time to gear up for the new season of landscape maintenance and put my crew back to work outside. Still no payment from insulation or the last landscape projects. Things got ugly real fast as I started daily phone calls to the son now that we didn't see each other as often. I called the father as well, who more or less ignored me. The son stopped answering my calls and texts. The father never had a straight answer for me. Now mid-April of 2009. Most of the communication has stopped on their end. I filed a contractor's lien on the landscape project to be paid out before the house sold, which prompted a call from the father to invite me to his home for lunch and talk. I accepted, thinking he was going to offer me a deal of some kind based on my past history with him. He basically told me that he had been, over the years, screwed out of money by different people, and that it was something I was going to have to learn to live with. My response was, I've been screwed out of money that people owe me as well, just not by anyone I considered a friend. I left his house determined to stick it to him. May 5th, 2009, I started a spray foam insulation company with the same level of equipment that he had, but about a year less experience than he had at that point. And on May 7th, 2 days later, I get a call from the father asking a landscape question, acting as if we were on normal terms. My response was, "Oh, I don't landscape anymore. I spray foam." "What are you talking about?" he asked. When I explained to him that I was operating a spray foam insulation company, he ended the phone call rather quickly. I then received a phone call from his son 5 minutes later, who had ignored my calls for the last many weeks, threatening me that he'd destroy my hopes of making it as an insulator and that no little landscaper could or would make it in this community. As a side note, with my newly formed company, there were now approximately 4 or 5 companies in the Pacific Northwest performing this kind of service. It's a small circle of people in the insulation world, and word gets around pretty quickly who does what. Our very first job was handed to us by our material supplier, which happened to be his supplier, and that job was a fix. Apparently, that very first job we'd worked on, that plastic surgeon's house, if you recall, was insulated incorrectly and with poor workmanship. Luckily, my only involvement on that house was prep work and cleanup. We ended up removing all of the insulation and reinstalling it. About a $65K job, which the owner of the house turned around and sued my old boss for and won. We then acquired the government contract at Fort Lewis that he had had because of poor communication on his part. So we systematically took apart his company by being better and more honest with people. The story spread in the spray foam insulation world, and we became somewhat hero-like in this region because they'd screwed so many people over. Oh, and at that time, if you might remember, the housing market took a giant crap, and guess who had 4 very large houses sitting out there that couldn't sell? Yep, the father, who ended up going bankrupt by mid-2009. The son, on the other hand, kept his head above water somehow a bit longer, but in October of 2009, I got a call from a repo man asking if I knew the son and where to find his spray foam equipment. My father-in-law happens to be a retired cop and private investigator, and I put him on the case to find said equipment. 2 days later, he called with the address and specific location of the equipment, which was behind a barn on an island with the tires aired down. I made the call to the repo man, and 2 hours later, he called me from his lot as he was pulling in with a very large trailer behind his truck, asking where he could send the bounty check. I kept the insulation business for about 3 years before being bought out by another company. I also kept the landscape company and still run it to this day. Moral of the story, landscapers may work in the dirt and seem simple, but tick one off and they will ruin you. Wow. Well, if anything, you were too kind and patient with these absolute jerks. If you had a contract with them, I feel like you could have just sued them for withholding payment right off the bat, so maybe just keeping on like you did was the right thing for you. Reassuring to know that if you deal honestly with people and do a good job, that you can still make it in some areas of development. I know that some contractors get a lot of bad rap. Guys like the author tend to get a lot of returning customers just by being decent people, and fair enough. And it's not at all surprising that the people who wrote contracts in bad faith did a crummy job. I'm just glad they got what was coming to them. Very satisfying. Am I the jerk for sending my dying mother to the hospice because of what she said? I lost my wife 5 years ago. She had a 10-year-old son who I got custody of after she passed away. The bio dad signed off parental rights at birth and never even met the kid. And we had a 6-year-old daughter together. My 10-year-old son, I consider him a son, has Down syndrome. My dying mother asked to come live with me 2 weeks ago to spend more time with us because she's dying and has only months to live. I told her she can come spend a week here first. She's here now, and we'll see how it works for everyone, most of all the kids. She came and things were going okay. Then a few years ago, she special ordered a new set of toys for my 6-year-old, a really expensive set, which I let fly even though I don't normally just let my kids choose hundreds of dollars worth of toys. But I get that she was trying to do something nice for her grandkids. Then today the set arrived just before dinner, and at dinner I asked my son what toys he chose. He said he didn't choose any toys, and I asked my mum what he chose. My son sometimes mixes things up, and I thought he just forgot. She said that she only bought the toys for her grandbaby, and I said that she has 2 grandkids, because I have 2 children, right? Then she says, "He's not your son." And I told the kids to go and play in the living room and told my mother that kind of talking is unacceptable in my house. She then said, "It's true. You have no obligation here. You should just go foster care or stick it in a facility before your life is ruined." I flipped out, called her all sorts of names, and told her I'll be calling hospice first thing in the morning and have them take her the same day, which I did. She cried all night and begged me not to make her go die alone in hospice, but I said she crossed the line and I'm done. I'll still visit my mother in hospice if she wants me to. My aunts called me a jerk, some of my friends said I should just let it go because her time is limited, and my sister, who lives abroad, said it was just plain cruel. My cousins said that what she said was awful and I did the right thing. I feel a little bit guilty over it anyway. Am I the jerk? No. If she's going to be that callous and awful about your adopted son and is incapable of showing compassion to them, then she sure as heck doesn't deserve any compassion herself. Advocating for you to slap it in a facility and then crying when she's put in one is about as good of a test of personality as you'd need. This sounds like a horrible situation for you to be in, but it's not fair to your kids to be in the house with an old lady who's going to talk about one of them as an it and go doling out preferential treatment. and I'm fascinated as to why none of the family who are criticizing you are offering to take her in themselves. Funny how that always seems to happen with difficult relatives. Landlord makes my life hell and refuses to pay me a deposit. So I freeze his bank account. Back in 2018, I had a temporary internship in California at an undisclosed large tech company. So I took a recommendation from a friend about a room for rent. It would be living with 5 other people, but otherwise it looked fantastic with spacious common areas, multiple huge TVs, full amenities, community rec center with a pool, short drive times to multiple places of interest, and all for $650 a month. Utilities included. I contacted the landlord, whom I will refer to as Crappy Landlord from here on out. He seemed fine on the phone at the time, so I sent him my security deposit to move in a month later. When it came time to move in, I discovered a few caveats that came with this low rent price. The common areas were all dusty, none of the 3 large TVs worked properly, and if we wanted to access the rec center and pool, we'd need to pay the $80 a month membership fee. And all of the short drive time estimates were exaggerated, unless you were speeding at twice the speed limit. Whatever, it's not the end of the world, especially at the relatively low prices. I'll survive. But then it got worse in the coming months. Crappy Landlord decided to charge us an extra $20 a month for paper towels and public cleaning supplies. Crappy Landlord only checked the community mailbox once a week when he was in town, and refused to trust anybody with the mailbox key. As it starts to roll into the summer, in June, Crappy Landlord decided that AC costs were too much and we were using it too much, so he removed the thermostat from the wall. Okay? One day, some of us tenants confronted him when he was at the house, since Crappy Landlord also slept at the house about 1 day a week, and I'll never forget his words as he rushed out. "It's legal for me to do it and I don't care since I don't have to live here." Well, sir, F you. I'm tilted as frick at this guy's obvious money grab from 6 tenants. Well, it turns out he's right. He legally doesn't need to provide air conditioning. So the next day, I purchase a high BTU freestanding portable air conditioner that exhausts out the window. Holy crap, this thing was luxury. Of course, I pump my room to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest setting. We have a couple of other minor disagreements that wind up with Crappy Landlord texting me that it's fine if I wanted to break my lease and move out early. Perfect. When Crappy Landlord finally gets a whiff of my AC setup, he comes to my room to complain about my AC unit. I reply curtly, "It's legal for me to do it and I don't care since I don't have to pay for electricity." He leaves later and sends me a text. "If you choose to run the AC in your room at 50 degrees because your computer generates so much heat, then that's your choice. But you'll need to pay an additional $100 per month for the additional electricity you've been spending. And that's going to be from the time you installed it in the room without my permission. Thank you much." Legally, I'm under no obligation to do this. Yeah, alright, unbeknownst to Crappy Landlord, I'm taking his move-out offers seriously, and this whole time I've been rallying the troops. All the tenants have been upset about everyone's living situation, so with some minor encouragement, I managed to convince 2 of the other 6 tenants to move out at the same time as me. They were on a month-to-month arrangement. I finally submit all of our notices of intent to vacate at the same time, barely a week after my previous conversation with Crappy Landlord. He's angry. He was just trying to get me out of the house, but now he has 3 rooms to fill instead of 1. I ask about my legally mandated pre-move-out inspection. In no uncertain terms, he told me to go F myself. He said he's too busy to perform an inspection. Huh, well that's illegal, but okay. Time comes to move out. I found another room for rent, much closer to the office for only $100 a month more. We all move out and I text Crappy Landlord about my security deposit. No response. I text again. No response. Okay, I see where this is going. I spend days and days reading the law, compiling evidence and screenshots, listing the laws that were broken. The smoking gun was the statute that requires a pre-move-out inspection and a list of things to fix, and itemized list of deductions within 21 days, or else Crappy Landlord loses the right to withhold any of my deposit. In addition, he'd be subject to treble damages if he's found to be acting in bad faith. I text him again and again. I give him plenty of leniency, and I even cite the laws so I can prove in court that I'm acting in good faith, and that Crappy Landlord intentionally ignored the laws that I made him aware about. Crappy Landlord probably thinks I'm a young pushover college student who won't follow through with legal threats. Well, sir, We're going to court because I'm petty as frick when it comes to people trying to mess me over. I file in small claims for $650 plus treble damages plus court costs. Crappy landlord files a counterclaim of $2,000 for damages to the property, claiming I caused flooding, and that I broke the microwave. Okay, buddy. In response, I gather testimonies from 3 of the other tenants and I build my case into a 40-page packet of evidence, complete with page numbers, a table of contents, and descriptions for every screenshot and photo. I make 3 copies of everything and submit it to the court and the defendant, Crappy Landlord. The court date is set for November and I leave the state just before Christmas, so just in time to appear in person since my internship ends and I fly home in December. He starts filing requests to postpone the trial. He cites a doctor's appointment and the motion is granted. Court date is rescheduled for a month later, in December but still before I fly home. New court date approaches and he files another request to postpone, citing another doctor's appointment. Somehow that motion is granted as well and we're rescheduled yet again to January. Darn. January rolls around and surprise, surprise, guess who's got another doctor's appointment conveniently on the same exact day of the trial? Denied. The court finally got wind of his bullcrap and denied the motion because he can't prove he scheduled the doctor's appointment prior to the court date being moved. Well damn, I'm not in California anymore, I'm across the country on the East Coast. Crappy landlord thinks if I'm no longer in the state, he'll automatically win since I'm not willing to fly back to California. Well, unbeknownst to Crappy landlord, California courts offer an option to appear by telephone. Haha. Court day comes and I get the call. I'm sworn in and then connected to the court. I'm given time to present my case. Unfortunately, I didn't prepare a script, so I kinda summarized the events and explain why I deserve money. Then Crappy Landlord gets time to defend himself and explain his counterclaim. He doesn't prepare anything either, and he ends up rambling about random crap that doesn't help his case at all. For example, he spends a lot of time explaining how another one of the tenants was crappy, and so his behavior was justified. He doesn't even have a sliver of evidence for his counterclaim when the judge asks for it. The judge asks a few more questions and announces that he'll review the evidence and we'll get the decision in the mail. A couple of weeks later, I get the judgment saying I'm owed $650. Crappy landlord gets nothing. Well damn, no treble damages for me. However, it's just my luck the crappy landlord is a piece of crap that won't accept defeat. He files an appeal for who knows what. It's granted. The redo trial is scheduled for May. This time I'm 10 times more prepared. Once again, I'm sworn in, and then they connect me to the courtroom speaker. This time I have a hashed-out script that I read, making sure to emphasize how often I informed Crappy Landlord of the law, and how often Crappy Landlord knowingly broke the law, and how I offered so much leniency and so many opportunities to do the right thing. Once again, Crappy Landlord doesn't prepare anything, but instead rambles on so much that even the judge tells him to get back on track multiple times. Crappy Landlord claims I caused water damage and he had to replace all the carpets. The judge asks for an invoice or receipt, and he has none. Crappy Landlord claims I broke the microwave, so the judge reads him the 3 witness statements that all state I didn't break the microwave. Crappy Landlord says they're all lying. He still has no evidence whatsoever. At this point, the judge clearly sounds done with his crap and says we'll get his decision in the mail, and the call ends. A couple of weeks later, I get the judgment, and I'm owed $1,800 and the crappy landlord still gets nothing. Well damn, would you look at that? His appeal did not quite work out for him. He goes from owing $650 to owing me $1,800. Being the moron that he is, he files for a mistrial, claiming I was not sworn in and that I lied in my testimony. Denied. Outside of court, Crappy Landlord offers a payment plan of $20 a month, which will take 7.5 years to pay back, or otherwise he refuses to pay up. Okay, I see how collecting my money is going to be now. I figure out he banks at Bank of America by looking at the checks I gave him for rent, and seeing where they got cashed. I file for a writ of execution that will allow me to perform a bank levy. It's granted, so I prepare a packet for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department to go to Bank of America and take his money. The LACSD serves him with papers and orders Bank of America to freeze his account. After his allotted time of 30 days to contest the seizure, the LACSD seizes his money plus 10% APY interest plus sheriff fees. I finally get the glorious check in the mail 20 months after moving out. I immediately deposited the money into my bank account via mobile check depositing. I'll probably frame the check. The total was $1,893.91. In short, landlord makes living conditions crappy, so he offers me an opportunity to move out. I convince 2 others to move out as well. He ghosts me when I ask for my deposit, so I take him to court. I win $650, so he appeals the court's decision. In the appeal, my award is tripled to $1,800. He refuses to pay up, so I get the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department to go to his bank, freeze his account, and seize his money. Some notes here. As a note, small claims cases are cheap to file. You have to pay about $50 in most states, and it'll rarely be as high as $100. Plus, the loser has to pay you back when you win. And some final tips for situations like this. Find small claims guides. There's a plethora of helpful information out there because everybody wants you to win. Even the court wants you to win. At least in California, they offer a free in-person small claims advisory clinic, where employees advise you and walk you through the whole process. Make sure you know the process and what to expect. Document everything. Have conversations through text or email if possible for easy screenshots. Photograph everything, even if you don't think it's important because the landlord might just claim you damaged it. Do your research on the law. Know what is legal and illegal, and know the penalties for violations. Compile evidence against your landlord and cite the laws that they're breaking. The easier you make it for the judge to see that you're right, the more likely they'll side with you. Get supporting witness statements. It changes the case from he said, she said, where the landlord is calling you a liar, to a 4v1 where the landlord has to call everybody a liar. Just don't commit hearsay. Have them appear in person or have them sign and submit a declaration. Follow procedures to the T. The last thing you want is for your evidence to be thrown out because you didn't send a copy to the defendant at least 10 days before the court date. Come to court prepared and remember the 7 Ps. Proper planning and preparation prevent poor performance. Judges like people who are on top of their crap. If you come to court unprepared, thinking that you can just talk your way to a win, it will be dead obvious. Don't expect the process to be quick. It'll take a while for your landlord to get their comeuppance, but it will be worth it. At the end of the day, the court wants you to win, it'll just take a while. So, am I the jerk for getting triple my deposit? Definitely not the jerk in this scenario. You literally gave the guy every out he possibly could have needed, and he lied and behaved like a complete jerk at every turn. It's legal for me to do it, and I don't care since I don't have to live here. God, talk about admitting that you're the villain here. You getting that much from him seems like a good penance for his behavior, while you and the others were living there. If he had to pay that much out to the others as well, then it's an amount of money that is making the narrator cackle in evil pleasure. Even if they didn't get paid, I think the most ringing endorsement of his crappiness was how easy it was to convince 2 other working adults to up and move their lives spontaneously in the middle of whatever else they had going on at the time. And the fact that 3 of them were willing to write in to make sure he lost money. You make a good point that I haven't considered. Most of the officials involved want to see the little guy win, if it's a clear case of the landlord just being evil and an exploitative monster. It's just up to us to make the process as clear as possible and help ourselves to win. And as we've said before here, take pictures and keep evidence, folks. You never know when you're going to need it with a slime bag like this. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Teacher denies bathroom privilege. Student asserts his dominance. Context: this happened in the early 90s, and at the time the teacher had been teaching for 30+ years. It was a rural area, so many of my friends' parents had also suffered through at least 1 year of primary school with this awful woman. I've seen a grown woman cry recounting memories of her experiences. This lady really was that bad. My 2nd grade teacher took pride in being a mean old bunt to her students. Wielding control over our tiny little bladders was something that gave her a particular satisfaction. One day, during cursive lessons, this kid named Joseph asked to use the bathroom. She told him he should have used the bathroom during morning recess and would have to wait until lunch. A little while later, he started squirming in his seat and again asked to use the bathroom, this time with more urgency. At this point, our teacher starts berating the kid by telling him he's a little baby for not holding his bladder like a big boy and suggesting he should wear diapers. Joseph gets tired of her crap, stands up from his seat, stares her directly in the eyes, and proceeds to unleash the most epic man-sized pee he could muster. As fate would have it, he was wearing those mesh material basketball shorts, so the pee just flowed unobstructed down his legs and pooled on the carpet beneath him. A wave of giggling quickly spread through the classroom, which was basically the second grade equivalent of a slow clap. Our teacher just stood there dumbfounded for a moment before grabbing Joseph by the arm and dragging him off to the principal's office. As they exited the room, Joseph glanced over his shoulder with a big grin on his face. A legend was born that day, and we all enjoyed our newfound bathroom privileges for the remainder of the school year. The teacher retired the following year. There's something about the act of releasing the burden of one's dignity while making eye contact like that. You did this to me, authority figure. This mess that I'm making is your fault. You had plenty of warning, and now you get to deal with this incredible puddle beneath me. My suffering is finite, and my defiance will be recorded through history alongside your failure. What a magnificent little effer Joseph was. He was going to whittle himself in his chair anyway, so he decided to do it in a way that gave himself ownership of the flow of events, if you'll pardon the pun. I wonder if the teacher's retirement was really connected to this stream of happenings, pun intended again, or if this was just the beginning of the slow decline of her fragile, small amounts of power that she exercised on infants. Am I the jerk for returning the shoes I got for my husband after he accused me of stealing from him? My husband is the breadwinner of the family. I stay home with the kids who are preschool age. He pays for the mortgage, bills, household needs, food, kids' needs, among other things. He has set a monthly budget for each category and handles getting everything done. Recently, he's become overwhelmed and told me to handle grocery shopping, but before he let me, he asked to write a list of all the stuff we need so he could calculate the total, and also so he'd have an idea of how much I'll be spending when I take his credit card. I didn't have an issue with that because this way we'd watch our spending habits. However, he said I'm never allowed to get something that isn't on the list unless I'm paying for it some other way. On Friday, I was doing some grocery shopping, as usual, and saw that the store had some nice shoes on sale. The price was insanely low for this brand, so I decided to grab a pair for my husband, thinking he'd be happy with them, since he needed new sneakers anyway. I bought them, and when I showed them to him, he flipped out on me, saying I made a huge mistake by buying something that wasn't on the list. I agreed with him, but I thought that since the shoes were for him, then it would be different. He said I screwed up and shouldn't have bought these sneakers without even telling him. But in my defense, I said the price was so low, so it's not like I spent $100 on the shoes. And also, I saw this as a great deal, and wanted him to have those nice sneakers. He plainly said that what I did is considered stealing since he never consented to have those sneakers purchased, and said that I'm being irresponsible with money, and that's why I no longer have an income and my spending habits need a grib. I felt hurt by what he said. We argued about it for hours and he avoided speaking to me the rest of the day. The next day I went and returned the sneakers and took the money back. He got home in the evening and lost it when he found out that I'd returned them. He said he couldn't believe how petty and childish I was to actually do this. I explained I was just correcting my mistake. He then tried to contact the store and was told the sneakers were already sold. He got even angrier at me, but I told him that he accused me of stealing from him when I was just trying to do a nice gesture for him. He yelled that I had a lot of nerve calling what I did a nice gesture while using his money to do it. I told him he had no right to yell at me after I corrected my mistake and gave back the money he accused me of stealing. He threw a fit and then went out with his friends and came home late at night, still not talking to me. Did I mess up? Maybe I shouldn't have purchased them without knowing they weren't on the list, but I just wanted him to have those sneakers and thought I was doing a nice gesture. Am I really a thief? Jesus Christ, I don't even know what it is this guy wants. Screaming at you for getting him a present, and then screaming at you again when you took it back. Everything outside his control seems to annoy him. Oh, that's what it's about, isn't it? Control. Whether or not he'd admit it, this feels like everything that didn't have a stamp of approval from him was a personal grievance. This is emotional and financial bullying, and I'm willing to bet that even if you gained your own means to buy it on your own terms, it was probably going to annoy him in another way. Him aside, spouses should have their own credit cards for emergencies and reasonable purchases without pre-planning. That's normal, no matter what the finances of the household in question are. So yeah, this guy's behavior is not normal, and if this sounds familiar, You should be stepping back to ask yourself whether this kind of arrangement is really okay.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.